going to call to order the Planning Commission meeting on December 17th, 2019 at 6:30. First up is approval of minutes from November 19th.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, then we have public appearances for non-agenda items, and I do have two people that want to speak on a non-agenda item, Sean and Nancy. I don't know who wants to go first. You guys can arm wrestle for it, but you can come on up. All right, whenever you're ready.
Sure, thanks. So I'm here as the school developer for an independent public secondary charter school called Milestone Democratic School. I hope you all got a copy of this letter for your records. It's also been emailed, so you should have access to it there as well. I just wanted to start off by passing on some gratitude from many of the folks that are part of the Milestone Democratic School team. We have a governance board made up of parents, including at least one resident of Fitchburg. We have a design team that's made up of young people, teenagers who have been volunteering their time to help bring this school to life. And when I returned from the meeting last week, they were all, safe to say, filled with gratitude for the fact that you all are considering this proposal. So for today, I am basically continuing to ask for your support for the proposal to amend the future land use for the parcel at 2823 Index Road from industrial general to business to allow for our school to open and begin the work of democratic teaching and learning, which we intend to start at that location in August of 2020. The timeline here is fairly critical. We are in the process of finalizing our authorization with an office of the UW system called the Office of Educational Opportunity. If you're not super up on the world of independent charter schools, the idea is they act, as our school board would act. They're the ones that give us the legal authorization to operate as a public school. This property in question, 2823 Index, was actually selected and toured and evaluated and ultimately brought to the consensus of this design team, this group of young people, two of whom, again, are teenage residents of the city of Fitchburg, who have volunteered their time to co-create the plan for Milestone going back to the summer of 2018. This location that the team has selected and approved is really the ideal site for meeting our mission. We intend to develop a school where learning is engaging, where all voices are heard, and where the most important step for everybody in the school community is that next step they're going to take. I wanted to very briefly share with you three elements of the school plan that was co-created by this youth design team, and I think you'll find that these three elements are fairly representative of our own work with this school, but also I think that they are in very tight alignment with many of the values and goals expressed in the current draft of the comprehensive plan and also in the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative and the proposed Youth Arts and Sports District. First of all, every student at Milestone Democratic School is going to participate in something we call Leaving to Learn, which means every student has a high-quality internship at a local business, a nonprofit, a government office. The students are really immersed in their communities. This workplace-based learning has shown to have tremendous value, not only for the students who engage in it, but also for business communities and communities in general. The more that young people have those authentic connections to the places where they're learning, the better off everybody seems to be. Second, as you would expect when you empower young people to help create curriculum and instruction, the school is going to have a strong focus on arts and athletics, which again makes it an excellent fit for the area which we are proposing.
Sean, if you could just wrap up. We're trying to keep the minutes.
Absolutely. And then the last thing I want to say, which I'll let Nancy kind of explain, is our relationship with this project called COPA, which she'll do a much better job of explaining. But our ability to open our school here at this site on Index Road is really crucial to our participation in COPA and moving that project forward. So that's all I'll say for now. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody would like to know any more about our school or the proposed location. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it, and thank you, Plan Commission. I'm here, Sean and I were both here last week, and we spoke with you, and we provided statements, so I'm not going to read the statement that I read last week. I'd rather just go over a few details related to it. But I'm here on behalf of Dale Sticka, who is the owner of Worldwide World LLC and Sosonic, both Fitchburg businesses, one located on Latham and one located, and Worldwide World owns the property on Index Road that Sean is referring to. And the goal is for Sean and the school to be able to locate into Dale's property and then become part of the COPA, which we hope to build within a couple of years. The COPA being a community, it's community organizations promoting the arts. And this will be a performing arts center in Fitchburg. And if you haven't yet heard about it, you will be certainly over the course of the next several months, as we'll be presenting to the full council. We'll also be presenting to other commissions and to CEDA. But our goal is to secure the funds necessary to get this project built in the next couple of years. One of the tenants that will be in our building, in addition to Sean, the organizations that will be in our building, quite honestly, they educate well over 600 or more students in the arts, in the various performing arts. And so the numbers of people that will come into Fitchburg as a result of this project being in Fitchburg is pretty substantial. Interestingly enough, on your land use map, and I'm just going to hold this up, but you've all got copies of it yourselves, and I anticipate that it may actually have been an oversight, that the area that we're talking about along Greenway Cross and Index Road is still identified as IG zoning, or IG on the future land map, whereas everything else around it, and I think consistent with the Fitchburg redevelopment plan, is business zoning, or business mapping anyway on this project. So, and the problem that we're encountering right now is really with regard, not with regard to so much the current zoning problem, but the consistency with the future land use map. And so our goal and our desire here, and you'll be seeing this, I know that Sonia's put it forward on page 126 of your 400 and some odd pages. There's an amendment request to actually take this area and rezone it or re-identify it for business. I've been in touch with the Music Foundry. They issued a statement and presented that to you today. I've been in touch with Engelhart, who also is in this area and have similar zoning and concerned about the zoning. And you may be hearing from them at some future point. We do realize that this is not on your agenda for action tonight, that you'll be revisiting again in January. But I think for the benefit of the school and the benefit of the property owner, if we had some understanding and idea that the commission was leaning toward making these amendments on this map, would allow the school to move forward, get their charter as they need to, and allow them to be open in August of 2020. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you. We're going to talk a little bit more about the zoning in K, actually. So do you want to speak at all about that before we move on?
Correct. As the applicant noted, this change was drafted on the future land use map. It's on page 406 of the larger packet, I believe, and then 126 of that supporting item for the comp plan, if the Plan Commission wishes to look at it. But it is one of the minor land use changes identified on the draft land use map that could potentially be adopted as part of this major update. And then just in terms of the industrial general future land use that's identified there now, that is a carryover from the 2009 plan. Since I wasn't here, I don't have the background as to why exactly that area was still designated as industrial general. It is generally consistent with the lands further east, which are City of Madison, and those are industrial general properties. However, I think the applicant is also correct in noting that other plans sort of envision a transition for that area, specifically the Vandewaal presentation that we've heard recently here at the Plan Commission, the visioning for that corridor, which identifies potential for youth sports and arts districts in that area. So staff doesn't have particular concerns at this time, but it is drafted in there for discussion later on our agenda.
All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, I don't have anything else for non-agenda items, so agenda review, anything people want to move around in the agenda at all? See nothing, I'll move on then. And first up is public hearing in consideration of rezone request, which kind of ties in with the public hearing and conditional use permit request as well. Susie, if you want to come up maybe and tell us what's going on before we open the public hearing, it's kind of nice for people to have an understanding. I don't think anyone else is going to speak, but I have some other people that want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good afternoon. Well, evening. Gosh, I don't even know what time it is. My name is Susie Jannon, and I pastor, along with my husband, Jeremiah, Chapel Valley Church. And just to give you a quick, brief understanding of what brought us here, we, in 1991, used to be the owners of 2950 Chapel Valley Church, which is why our church name is Chapel Valley, which is now currently Gunderson Funeral Home. At the time, in 2009, we actually began the process of, well, we sold the building with hopes of building in Fitchburg, and through some crazy turn of events and long details, which we don't have time for, we have been a mobile church since 2009. We have been really holding out to find the right spot in Fitchburg. Our church is really active on what would be the Verona West Side area of Fitchburg. And so we do all of our kind of outreach. You know, part of being a mobile church is we've learned how to be a part of the community without having an actual physical building. So when 2970 Chapel Valley Road came for sale, we kind of began to look at it. Again, thinking out of the box is something that is a strength for us as a congregation, as a church. We began to look to think about what we can do. Oftentimes in Fitchburg, you hear about facilities or buildings being multi-use, and it kind of begins to have a narrow mind. You're going to be a church, and you're going to be multi-use, and you're going to have community involvement type of deal. 2970 actually allows us to be creative in being a multi-use building. We're looking for it to, we'd be purchasing the whole property and keeping it a multi-use building, with primarily the first floor being the current leases that we have, or the current tenants would be staying as is, and then occupying the second floor eventually in its entirety. And I included it in some really, these are not like architectural drawings or anything that's set in concrete, but we had sent just a brief drawing of what we ideally would like to see. Again, there are current leases and tenants in there, so a lot of what we're doing is going to be structured to fit around those current tenants, to ensure that we're able to keep occupancy with the tenants, as well as being able to occupy the building as a church. So rezone and conditional use is what we're here for today. Is that good? Any questions or?
We can get to questions. I'm going to read all of I have lots of citizen comment requests or comment forms, and I don't think anyone else wants to speak, but I'll read these off. First, I have Abigail Smith from Madison Registry and Support. This church has and will continue to do a great work in Fitchburg. I would love to have its home in this community. I have Andrew Negron, maybe, from Fitchburg Registry and Support. Tim Kritzer from Madison Registry and Support, and also available for questions. Terry Bell from Monona Registry and Support. Steve Smith from Fitchburg, or Town of Verona actually, in support, Registry and Support. I approve of Chapel Valley's motives in the community. Larry DeWord from Fitchburg Registry and Support. Rezoning is a good item. It helps the community. I have Veda DeWord from Fitchburg Registry and Support. I love Chapel Valley Church. They are devoted to serving the Fitchburg community. They have given free food to the community in the parks, free trees at Christmas in 2 parks, free interactive movies, etc. It would be great to have the church in our neighborhood. I have Jeremiah Jenin from Fitchburg Registry and Support, and I support the proposed rezone. Zach DeWord from Madison Registry and Support. Chapel Valley has been a great asset to the community. Lisa Sotis from Fitchburg Registering in Support. David Fredrickson from Madison Registering in Support. Chapel Valley is very sharing of joy and helpful to the community of Fitchburg with community events. Scott DeWord from Madison Registering in Support. I support the rezoning. Ann Cron from Madison Registering in Support. Christian Bergeson from Madison Registering in Support. I'm excited to be planted in Fitchburg again. It will be an honor to be ministering to Fitchburg. Cole Pryor from Madison Registering in Support. I am very much in support. All right, so I think that's all I have for B. So seeing that nothing else, I'll close the public hearing, but now open up to questions, discussion from anyone up here. Any thoughts at all? One question I had, and I guess this is for staff, and I don't know how much this falls under our purview. Do we know, I know that you're only going to use, I think, the top half of the two-story building for the church. Do we know if the bottom half is rented out as retail, does that half still get taxed? Does the whole building kind of be non-taxed? Do you know how that works at all?
We did discuss briefly with the city assessing department, and the intent would be to continue to tax the taxable portions of the building with a pilot or no tax for the religious purpose on the second story. So that would be something that would be worked out in detail with the assessor.
Yeah, basically comes down to the amount of square footage that we're doing in the leases that we have that are there, and would be something to be evaluated on a yearly basis.
Great. And I mean, that said, either way, I think it's a great project and great to have a permanent home for Chapel Valley. I know that they do a lot of great things in the community. Other thoughts, questions, comments, feedback?
No, this seems just
Yeah.
formality, right? From business.
Business general to business professional with a conditional use for our portion for religious services. So it's kind of a twofold thing, but yeah.
Yeah, but just a formality because there's nothing wrong with it. There's just that particular dedication, I guess, of that business piece doesn't cover religious, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
the space is fine. The
How about
area's
if we
fine.
Sonia, if you just want to give a staff
Sure.
report, that'd be great.
First of all, apologies, there's a little bit of a discrepancy on the numbering and lettering of the agenda items. So what's on the screen is correct. This is agenda item A. It accommodates both the rezone and the conditional use in one agenda item. We do need two separate motions as they're two separate actions. And then in the agenda, there's also some misnumbering. But in any case, the property is currently zoned business general, which does not allow for any religious use. So in order to pursue a conditional use permit for the church, they need to rezone to business professional. So no concerns in terms of consistency with the comp plan or surrounding properties. And then in the conditional use permit review, one of the big things that we look at is parking. The application did note that they would hope to or plan to grow in capacity for their congregation up to 265 people, and that's what they plan to be able to accommodate within the sanctuary space. So per our City of Fitchburg parking standards, that would require 53 parking stalls. The site does have 83 parking stalls on site, so no concerns there. In addition, primarily services are held on Sunday or with weeknight classes, which operate well in opposition to the business uses, which are normal hours 8 to 5 during the week. So no concerns. Staff recommendation is for approval on both items as listed in the staff report.
Other comments, Tom?
I asked Blackhawk Church the same question I'm going to ask you in reference to the use of the church if neighborhood association wanted to use it some night, or if there was a weekend and they had a Saturday event going on, could it be used? If the police department was holding a, believe it or not, seminar or something they had to have, could that be used?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the intention of the building would be to not just serve our church, which has never been any of our intention of what we do, but to see how we can best utilize it also with the city. So in creating the spaces that can be common spaces with keeping, you know, those things in mind, that it wouldn't be so built in a way that it's only for a church use. But I think that there will be community common space that the city would find useful, or community, not just the city, but the community.
Anyone else at all? Unless someone wants to do a motion.
What other
Lane, yeah.
wow. What other spaces did you look at? Why is this one so perfect compared to other spaces in Fitchburg? Off the top of my head, I'm going off the old fire station right off of King James. I know that's been proposed as a church. You know, what other spaces did you look at? What makes this one so perfect for you?
I don't know if this would call it perfect. We've been on this hunt for 10 years, and so after 10 years, you kind of decide, well, after probably year 3, you're not going to settle. And so we had actually looked at various buildings that we decided would not be a great fit. What we find this being a great fit is that it can actually be a multi-use building. It's already in function, so it's not going to just be sitting when we're not using it, right? So you have your leasing tenants who are using it, occupying during the day, which is really great for us. It lends itself to growing, so there's opportunity for growth in there. It's a nice big box. So, I mean, there's those, when we were looking for a building, those were things that were, again, not a perfect, because I guess in an ideal world, you'd be perfectly building your own building in the most perfect spot. Honestly, it's a little bit further from where we would have initially wanted our church to be, which was frankly in the Verona Road West area. That comes with a lot of stipulations, and holding out, there hadn't been a spot that we had said yes. Our commitment, both my husband and I, was that we weren't going to force anything, that if this was going to work, it almost had to be close to turnkey in what we envisioned our church building to be. And this building happened to do that. It lended itself to, as tenants, you know, their leases and where we are right now as a church to where we want to be. It was a place that we could find that we can grow, be a home base, because that's what's really important to us more than anything, is that we really just need a home base to facilitate. That's not my home as a church office, but to be able to facilitate and maximize what we're already doing at a greater capacity. Because the other big concern for us is that we would get ourselves into a building and not be able to continue with the community stuff we're doing, or that we would be in a place that would be inaccessible to the people we're reaching, which quite frankly, I mean, since you asked this question, all of our community events that we have, we've not had a huge turnout from event to church growth. So what is telling me is that people are coming to our events because they enjoy the community atmosphere, and they're not tied to location because they're not coming to our events, if that makes sense. So us changing our point of view and saying, well, maybe our location isn't as important to us as we initially thought it was, which, you know, time has kind of proven for us, then allowed us to freely think out of the box of where we wanted to land.
Thanks.
Anything else? Stephen?
I move to approve with the 5 conditions noted by staff.
So there's two things.
Conditions, yeah.
One is a rezone request, which has no conditions, and 2 is a conditional use
Okay.
permit. So we got to do 2 separate things. So
Other one. Well, which one do we go off of? Staff notes or what's on the screen?
The staff memo.
in the staff memo, that
Okay.
it says approval of, well, there's 2 things on
Yep.
there
All right, then I move to approve RZ 2323-19.
Second.
with no conditions. All right, seconded by Lane, I believe. All right, then all in. Okay. All right. Then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, and then the conditional use permit.
Move to approve CU 23-23-19 with 5 conditions as stated by staff.
Second.
All right, seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, thank you,
Guys.
Susie.
This is
All right, moving along to public hearing and consideration of rezone request for, I don't know, Mike, Ned, if you guys want to come up and tell us what you got, and I'll open the public hearing from there.
Hi, yes, I'm Mike Thorson, as you said, Mayor, with Adventure Capital, with my co-founder Ned Hoyt, and Jolie from JLA Architects. Since our original pre-app submittal in November, we spent a little bit of time introducing ourselves and our firm and our experiences, so I will dispense with those for tonight and keep it a little more brief. Since that time, we've refined the design slightly, but there haven't been any substantial changes to the concept of what we're trying to do here. I think we'll have Joe walk you through some of the refinements that have been done as we progressed the design, but substantially the concept of the 155 to 160 unit building with roughly 10,000 square feet of commercial and retail is intact. Some minor progressions from there, and I'll let Joe start to walk you through.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. All right. One thing to note is, since our last meeting, we did have a neighborhood meeting on November 20th, I believe it was. We had pretty minor turnout, but it was all, despite of that, all the feedback we received was positive. We didn't receive any negative feedback. We presented what you'll see here today. This is just a little more refined. Sonia, we sent some imagery. Maybe we want to start with the site plan and then go in imagery. I'll just briefly describe this. So it has not changed substantially. There we go. It has not really changed at all, with the exception of some refinements. So if you remember, we have about a 14-foot drop along Fish Hatchery as we go south. That's a pretty challenging constraint on the site. So to solve that, we have about 5,000 square feet of commercial retail on the corner of Fish Hatchery and the Traceway extension, bookended on the south end by some retail at this entry point as well. And in between, we have an entire parking level of covered parking, and then above that, 4 floors of residential multifamily apartments, and a occupiable green roof that serves as a common amenity for the residents. So this is above the parking level as well. If you could go to the elevations, that'd be great, or the perspectives. So here's a perspective of the building from Fish Hatchery is along this direction, and then the Traceway extension is off to the left. So this is the corner retail space. So this is a 2-story space. Not 2 levels of retail, but a two-story volume. So you can see there's 2 floors of residential above that space, but as you go down Fish Hatchery, there's 4 levels of multifamily, and then you can see slightly here how the grade drops, and then that level that's partially exposed as you go south is the parking level. So you can see the bookend here, and right down here is the other retail portion as well. Again, we're still refining the architecture, but it's more of a contemporary aesthetic. What you see here, the strategy we're going for is to focus, well, what you see here, the reddish is masonry, and we're trying to, and then this darker gray is also masonry, and then the other materials are either a fiber cement panel system or a metal panel system. It's not all going to be metal. We might just do this retail area, and then on the multifamily would be fiber cement. We're still working out the details on that, but the aesthetics and the placement of the materials are what we're proposing here. So the strategy is along Fish Hatchery you see here, there's a large amount of masonry, and then on the Traceway extension there'll be a large amount of masonry, and then as we go into the non-visible or less visible facades, we reduce that drastically. So strategy was, instead of doing for instance, 2 levels of masonry around the entire building, we focused 4 on the most visible facades and reduced it even more on the less visible facades. So we thought that was a good strategy. So if you could go to the next. This is further south on Fish Hatchery looking at the building. So this is the southernmost commercial portion. And this is a single story volume. And then you can see and this is at the same level as the parking garage. So there's kind of a step here. So I think there was a question by Mr. Clauder last time about how we're accommodating that grade change down Fish Hatchery. So you can kind of see it here. So this is the ground floor retail at that northern portion of the building, and as the grade drops down, so this residential level is at the same level as this ground floor retail, but as the grade drops down to the south, this retail commercial component is at a lower level, at the same level as the parking deck. So we wanted to work the grades to have some occupiable space on the ground levels as much as we can, and so we're bookending the building in that way. If you could go to the next one, please. This is looking westernly from Traceway, so this is the Traceway extension, the curve here. So you can see that northernly most commercial retail. This will be the main residential entry right in this area. And then again, all of this reddish material and this base would be masonry. So the masonry base goes all the way around the building, and then a different sort of brick material will go up along Traceway. And as we turn the corner on this less visible side, then we start to switch to more of a fiber cement material on the upper levels. This is just an image of the residential entry and the northernmost commercial retail center. So there'll be some outdoor space conceptually for that retail. You know, what those tenants are, we don't know yet, but we want to have the flexibility and the opportunity to have some outdoor space there. Just another shot of that. You can go to the next one. That's just that same view. This is around the southern side of the building. So you can see here, this is the C shape. This is the courtyard or the raised green roof. This is all kind of back of house. This is the parking level. So that's all a masonry base. You can go to the next one. And here's just a bird's eye perspective of where we're at with the green roof design right now. Very popular. Our clients have done this before in the Garver Point development. I think some of you have seen that. So very similar as far as concept. Large area of both landscape and hardscape for common space amenities for the residents. So this is inside the building. This would be the club room area with some outdoor patio with some covered structure. And then there'd be some play area, some larger hardscape area, a couple of fire pits. Just a real nice space for the residents to use. This is just another view of that southernmost retail section. And I think that might be it. That is? Okay. So that's we really haven't changed anything. We just refined some things and wanted to present that to you to get some initial feedback as we work towards the SIP. Thanks.
All right. Then I will quick open the public hearing. I don't have any comments from the public or anyone that wants to speak from the public. So seeing none, I'll close the official public hearing. Do you want to give a staff report, sorry?
So just a summary. Again, the proposal is for 157 residential units with about 10,000 square feet of commercial space. The parking is both within the building as well as surface parking, and the parking ratio that they're providing is about 1.2 stalls per unit on the residential side of things. And then it does appear that they would provide adequate parking per our general zoning standards for the commercial, the two commercial tenant spaces. The 1.2 stalls per residential unit ratio is a little bit more comparable to some of the senior projects that we've seen recently. But again, the goal of PDD zoning is to work through those case-by-case sort of negotiated zoning standards for the project, and the development team feels comfortable with the ratio that they're proposing. So in terms of process for public record, the PDD process begins with this sort of formal rezoning to Plan Development District General Implementation Plan. So that's what we're looking at tonight, PDD GIP zoning. If this is approved by the Plan Commission and the Council, then next steps would include rezoning to the specific implementation plan, as well as any other approvals that are required, such as the architectural design review, as well as a land division. So we'd be looking at a certified survey map to accomplish the dedication necessary for this Traceway Drive extension east of Fish Hatchery Road. We've noted in the staff report that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically the focus on redevelopment and infill, as well as the visioning presented by Vanderwall for this corridor, the TIF district that's in place, and just in general terms, reusing existing infrastructure, maximizing the development on the site. We also noted in the staff report that the project required amendment of the environmental corridor on the south end of the site by CARPC, and CARPC held a public hearing and voted on the item last Thursday night, and they did approve that with conditions, so it's subject to approval then by the DNR, and I haven't heard an update yet whether that's been approved, but that's an administrative step by the DNR, so we're still waiting to hear on that, and the conditions are incorporated into the staff recommendation that came from CARPC. So the ordinance is for the GIP rezoning, and that includes 10 recommended conditions of approval in the staff report. Nothing unusual, it just establishes the zoning standards that you'd be approving, erosion control, stormwater management permits, MMSD fees, fees in lieu of parkland dedication to be established with future SIP and ADR reviews. And again, things that we've discussed, and item number 10 is the recommended conditions from CARPC.
All right.
Just want to say to Sonia and Mike and Pat as well, thank you very much for all the help with the CARPC.
Comments at all? Questions? Ed?
One, and this is more of an architectural design thing, but I thought I'd mention it now. There is not a doorway into the residential portion of the building off of Fish Hatchery Road, off of the sidewalk there?
No.
Is that something you've considered? And from a walkability standpoint, it really would be good to have the building address Fish Hatchery Road a little bit more, and that could be accomplished with even one entrance into the building from under the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Other comments at all, Tom?
Just some general questions I have, just kind of general type thing. I think staff said, how many apartment units or how many, tell me the numbers, would you?
57. Yeah.
Housing numbers, just
Right now, 157 total units.
157?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea, I saw commercial, oh, there it is right there in the corner. Do you have any idea what you're thinking about putting in there? Or do you have some ideas? Don't tell me a bank.
Yeah, so that's always kind of the commercial and retail always kind of gets left till the end because people don't seem to be interested in looking at them this far in advance when they're planning. But our vision would be something in that northern, the kind of larger, more high-profile area along the lines of restaurant or bar and grill type businesses, whereas the lower profile kind of southern, we would expect to be more professional services and office type users. Our intention is to move our offices into that southern portion as well.
I'll clarify that bank statement too. My wife works for a bank. Long time. So I'll clarify that.
Tom, we generally prefer someone who pays the rent.
If you go the belt line to PD, count the banks. Can I have the street view of Fish Hatchery Road? I'm sorry, the overall view, like going up, going north, thank you. Staff, or maybe you can help me, in reference to turning in here, I'm looking at, not up on Traceway, you know, just turning in, yeah, right in there. Do we have a turn lane, or is that to be, maybe I'm ahead of myself, when Fish Hatchery Road, if it gets redesigned, is there a turn lane here, or is there going to be a turn? What's going on there?
This entrance would be limited to right in and right out on Fish Hatchery Road, and this median cut would not exist. Is that correct?
It's going to be closed.
Yep.
Be closed.
So this right in, right out is consistent with the reconstruction plans.
And there will be that third lane, which is buses, right-hand turns. That's not for through traffic. So it'll be 3 lanes on each side, but just like right now, there's only 2 lanes of kind of through traffic. The third lane is for buses. It could be for right-hand turns.
Okay. That's all I had for right now.
Steve?
So I was just gonna joke, if we're gonna have to put a bank on one end, can we put a gas station on the other? That's a Fish Hatchery. Just a question of, we had the community meeting on November 20th. You said it was low attendance. Could you give us a rough idea how many people were there?
Sure. We had 1 neighbor and about 8 to 10 city staff and alders.
I think we only had 10 neighbors to mail out to because they're actually.
There's really
limited
within
number of
the.
parcels.
Sure.
Then most of them are commercial parcels.
The other question is, do you have an idea of price points for each of the units?
We do. So we think from our market research of achievable rents, and these are going to be market rate apartments, we believe that $1.60 to $1.65 a square foot on average across the units. The way that works usually, typically it'll be 15 or 20 cents higher with the studios, and then slowly come down to the larger 1-bedrooms will be around that $1.65 per square foot, and then you get the larger 2s and 2+s that then come $1.50, $1.55 per square foot.
So, I guess, not talking numbers, just in general, are we talking pretty higher end, like granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, or more of a moderate approach? Or
sure. So we don't like to reinvent the wheel. This will be our 5th development project. The first 3, we were either junior partners or joint venture partners with McGrath Property Group. The last one, we were the lead development partner at Garver Point. All of them are luxury kind of Class A. We have quartz or granite type countertops. We have stainless steel fixtures. I don't think you had the pleasure of joining us on the Garver Point tour, but many of the other staff and the mayor and some of the elders did. Very similar type quality building. One of the, you could slap another low quality kind of, I don't know how to describe it in a polite way, but just a piece of junk like onto this property and make a lot of money with really cheap rents and, vinyl floors or what have you, but that's not a kind of project that our firm develops. So if we're going to do a project in this area, we're going to do similar to what we have in our portfolio now. And would be happy to take you on a tour of Garver Point anytime.
Other comments, feedback at all? I know one of the things I like is how it, in some ways, bookends the senior project on the other side of Fish Hatchery Road for kind of a pretty nice, I won't say entrance because it's in the middle of the city, but it really kind of leads into that upper Fish Hatchery Road. And I think this project, I also saw the Garver Point project, so I've seen the stuff these guys do, but it really takes what the senior project has done and really raised the bar even higher, and really kind of, I think, is upping the ante. And I think hopefully as we see further redevelopment, other people kind of try to match this and maybe try to exceed it. But I think that this has done a great job of really increasing the quality on that area, which I think is important. Does Zach?
Quick question on the parking. So you have 50 stalls for the retail spaces. Are you going to be restricting parking to those? Or do you anticipate people using those as like an overnight and then leaving in the morning type of situation?
Typically, so especially the surface exteriors, they get a lot of overlap parking. We would signage the ones immediately adjacent to the recent as for guest parking and retail and commercial space customers. We would then also signage off limiting the kind of parking further to the east as being for tenants only.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else, Al? Yeah. Ed.
I'll move approval of rezone 2328-19 with the 10 conditions per the draft ordinance.
I'll second.
You have a further question, Tom? Yeah.
Yeah, just move approval, but how do we approach this DNR situation?
The conditions include that it doesn't trump any other permit or approval that would be required, so they would still need to get their DNR approval, but it doesn't keep us from acting tonight.
All right. If there's not any other questions, then I'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay. All right, that's approved. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, moving along to the final plat, FP 232719, the 6th edition for 9 Springs. Do we have anyone here to speak to this? I don't. All right, Sonia, if you want to speak to it then, that'd be great.
So this is a replat of parcels over on the east side of town, in the uptown area, 9 Springs plat, or along Lacey Road in our Smart Code district, just across from the new Phoenix development. So these are platted lots in Smart Code under the Transect 5, which would allow for future development there. What the replat does is just reduces the overall number of parcels from 7 to 5. They're just looking to reconfigure lots to better accommodate the development they want to pursue there. And then it does include a relocation of one of the outlots in the plat, and that outlot was dedicated to the public for passage purposes. So they're just moving that over slightly. It requires a little bit more administrative work by the city. We need to have Common Council approve vacating that since it was dedicated to the public. But again, they're just relocating it, so no concerns there. And the staff recommendation is for approval with 7 conditions of approval, all pretty standard.
All right. Anything else? All right. One question I have, on the map, it has the 5 parcels. The top 2 or the northern 2, those already have apartment buildings on, correct? Or is it more than just the 2?
Yeah, so it's just the northern one. Is this correct, Lisa? This shaped parcel. Yeah, that's the Raven development, and they have the outbuilding pool clubhouse on the back of the property.
Okay. Do you know, are they still planning apartments on the other 4?
Yes.
Great. All right. Hopefully they decide to do some condos. Yeah, Tom?
Isn't this down by Cheyenne Road? Am I thinking right? It was down by the corner by Cheyenne and Lacey?
It's kind of where Lacey turns from Old Lacey to New Lacey, right across the street from the Phoenix building that just opened up. It's really between East Sherrill and that roundabout on Lacey. They have, the one on the corner, and then this is the northernmost one, and this is their new building they've put in there. They've got a few bit more. So Cheyenne is parallel to this part of Lacey Road. Yep. Yeah, so that's where New Lacey kind of starts from that roundabout on the bottom of that. I do like that it sounds like there's going to be less buildings. So I do like that part. There's a lot of apartments in this area. Other questions at all? None. Someone wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve FP 23-27-19 with 7 conditions as noted by staff.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Ed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, that is approved. Move along. Let's see here. Debbie, if you want to come up, and Wade, whoever else is presenting, that'd be great.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Beaver. I'm the Vice President for William Ryan Homes, and we are the contract purchasers from the O'Brien family. We're here today for the second edition for Stoner Prairie off of Seminole Highway to get that plat approved. It is consistent with the preliminary plat that was already approved, and so we're really here to just answer questions.
All right. Sonia, do you want to give a staff report?
Sure. Yep, this is the second addition to Stoner Prairie. I've identified it here in the staff report near Seminole Highway and Lacey Road. The plat would create 44 single-family lots. The zoning is already in place with RL, low-density residential. The preliminary plat was already approved, so this is the final plat. As the applicants noted, it is consistent with that preliminary plat, so no concerns from staff. The staff recommendation is for approval with 10 conditions. They're all very general, including approval and execution of the subdivision improvement agreement for public improvements, fees in lieu of parkland dedication and park improvement fees shall be paid, erosion control and stormwater management permits obtained, MMSD fees, standard conditions regarding utilities, outstanding comments from Public Works, as well as this last condition, which I could bring up the plat here. So lot 109, let me just get this open. Is it 43 single-family lots?
Yeah, it is 43.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the 10th recommended condition by staff is regarding this lot shown at the sort of southwestern portion of the plat. And you can see here that it's part of, this is a dashed line where my cursor is, which outlines the property here with an easement, but it's really part of this larger parcel, the boundaries of which extend all the way up to Minong, along the plat boundary, down to Lacey Road and back. So the home site would be allowed here, where the number 109 is shown, but the rest of the property would be subject to private stormwater easements. Staff recommended that this just be created as a separate lot and the remainder be created as an outlot for those private stormwater purposes, so that we're not burdening that residential lot with owning something in common ownership with the HOA.
Anything else? All right. And I know, and actually we're talking about the project just to the west of this that Veridian is doing, but there was a question when we were talking about that about when is this going to be developed so that this access to Lacey Road is there through Minong to Wayfair, I think it is. And so it's good to see that this is coming through and the plan is to do this sooner than later and ease some of those concerns that people had next door. Yeah, Zach?
Do we have a comparison on kind of the timelines between the two? Do we know how closely?
Well, I know that, well, we can ask the Veridian people in a second here, but they're going to be in phases, and I don't, and they're going to do kind of, well, initially anyway, the plan was to do north of Minong first. So, I mean, they're going to be roughly about the same time, give or take. Other questions, comments?
Question for staff. We talked earlier about the access. Do we need to worry about that here since we have it on the crescent one?
Yeah, on the Crescent Crossing plat, which is next, we identified making sure that there's two access points into the plat while it's under construction for public safety purposes. So we talked about that a little bit on the Viridian Crescent Crossing plat when it went through council on their preliminary. Stephen brought up the question on this plat and whether or not Lacey would provide that this connection would be made to Lacey. Maybe we can turn to the applicants and just ask what the phasing of those public improvements would be and when you would anticipate all of the connections to be made in relation to your building permits.
So originally our plan was to start doing underground stormwater and underground improvements sometime this winter. But I understand that we actually have we're waiting for staff because the storms or the sanitary sewer has to run along Lacey Road in order to meet us at our southern boundary. I can't tell you what the road is, but the sewer needs to run up and down Lacey Road in order for us to begin our improvements. I just can't justify spending money and putting in improvements to get to Lacey Road and find out we don't have anything to connect to. So we've been working with staff on that, and really until we get an answer on when that's going to happen, our development is contingent upon that sewer going in.
I think it might be noteworthy to add, though, too, we have pushed the agenda and submitted for permits and final construction documents, things like that, so we are.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
Our plan was to start, February, March, but we're not going to be able to do that if we don't know that the sewer is going in, approved, ready to go.
So in other cases, again, the concern is just public safety and access. So in other situations, we've allowed a fire access. I think in Terravessa, there was the gravel drive to allow public safety vehicles to enter there. So it is something that if the Plan Commission wants to clarify, we could add it to the recommended condition number 3. I'll just bring that up. Subdivision improvement agreement shall be approved and executed prior to city signing of the final plat. So in that subdivision improvement agreement, the applicant would work with public works staff to identify the phasing of public improvements and all of those details. So we could add something to the end of this condition number 3 that says, including satisfaction of any concerns by the fire chief or director of public works regarding a second access point to Lacey Road during construction. And that way we can kick it to public works staff to ensure that fire that safety concerns are met.
So currently there is access off of Lacey Road. I don't know if we were required because I wasn't here, but we had to put culverts in. So there is an access to what's currently the farmland off of Lacey Road that would act as fire, life, and safety.
Is it a farm equipment access point?
Mm-hmm.
So we would just want to make sure and confirm with the fire chief that it could hold the weight of the fire truck and be adequate for their public safety response, more than perhaps a farm equipment access.
Okay.
Other comments at all, thoughts?
Did you add it or not?
Well, it's up to you to add, but I've recommended what you could potentially add to condition 3. Yeah.
Whoever makes a motion can add that if they want to.
I'll make a motion to approve FP 2326-19 with the 10 conditions noted by staff, with the addition to condition 3 to involve public works, right, public safety, to make sure that they will have proper access points.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded. All right, then all in favor can say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving along to the plat request for FP 2325. Thank you. All right, then we got Dan, Brian. Come on up. All right, go right ahead.
I'm going to recuse on F and G.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Again,
Yeah.
Brian Munson with Vanderwall Associates. Here with me is Dan Day from Donfield Kotke. Very briefly, just to talk a little bit about the submittal in front of you tonight. It is the final plat and PIP for the Crescent Crossing neighborhood, effectively mirroring the discussions we had for the GDP and the preliminary plat. The one difference is a slight reduction in units. As we looked at the unit sizing within the twin home product, there was an opportunity to incorporate some additional floor plans by reducing the unit count within there by 4. So what's in front of you tonight is for 117 total units. It will be built out in multiple phases, as you mentioned, roughly working from Minong South, including the extension of Minong all the way across the property as part of Phase 1. And we're excited to be back and look forward to breaking ground on the project this spring and moving quickly into construction. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
I just wanted to add quickly, we had some very positive conversations with staff, engineering and planning staff over the last couple of weeks, and ironed out a few details that become very helpful for us. So thank you.
Great. Do you want to give a staff report, Sonia?
Sure. So this includes 2 items. Will require motions on both. Well, we're just looking at the final plat, but there's also the rezone request subsequently related to this project. So as the applicants noted, it's 117 total units. The numbers are broken down in the staff report between lots that would be anticipated for use for detached single-family homes versus sort of attached 2-family units. Consistency with the comp plan we've gone over. Staff's recommendation or determination is it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. The final plat's also consistent with the preliminary plat that we approved. And so the staff recommendation is for approval, and there are 18 conditions as listed in the staff report, and all of them are very standard regarding various agreements and other permits that would need to be obtained.
And just so people are clear, do we have to do a motion to approve the final plat and then a motion to approve the rezone?
Yep, and then we'll need to make sure we open the public hearing on the rezone, and
Yep.
the applicants might have more comments. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll do okay. So it kind of, I mean, it's all kind of the same, but speaking to the final plat, other comments, questions people might have? I know residents will enjoy hearing that there's a few less lots there than what was last proposed.
That's a great question. Where is the residents stand on this? Have they had meeting? You guys had more meetings, or just since the last time you were here, just those?
No, we have not.
Other comments at all? I think they're continuing to come back with what they proposed last time they were here, and so I think that's good to see that there's no major changes.
I like it.
I'll move to approve FP 2325-19 with the 18 conditions.
Second.
All right, then all in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? And anyone would like to abstain? All right, one abstention. All right, then I will also now open the public hearing for the rezone request. And I do not have anyone that's registered to speak. So seeing no one that wants to speak further, I will close the public hearing. And is there anything you want to add on the rezone request?
Nope.
All right.
Yep.
Further questions on the rezone request at all? All right, anything further from staff?
Just a reminder, this is following that PDD process, so we already approved the formal rezone to GIP, General Implementation Plan, and this is the next step for specific implementation plan. It identifies those specific zoning standards to this project, and those are just outlined in the recommended ordinance. For example, the 65 single-family homes that they're proposing follow the zoning standards in a district that they're calling Crescent Crossing District 1. So that's detailed in the specific implementation document. And again, no major concerns. Consistent with the GIP that we approved.
All right. Any further questions at all?
Move to approve RZ, it'll be 23-24-19 with 6 conditions as noted by staff. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Then all in favor, can say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? And abstain? Abstain. All right, one abstention.
Very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, moving right along then to G, and this is a resolution endorsing the city's request to amend the urban service area for the Fahey property, the McGaw neighborhood. All right, so Ron and Randy and Michael and whoever else, if you want to come up, that'd be great.
Good evening. My name is Randy Christensen, Heinrichs Development Group, representing the Fahey property, Fahey Lands property. What I'd like to do, what I'd like to start out with is just to kind of give you a little bit of a update and background on the current Fahey Fields subdivision that's out there. One of the things I want to mention right away is our Phase 3 that we just completed this past spring. We were selected for the 2020 Parade of Homes. So we're real excited about that, to get the Parade of Homes back into Fitchburg, get a little bit more publicity for Fitchburg, Fitchburg residential, all that the parade will bring with it. So we're extremely excited about that. We worked real hard to get that parade opportunity here with the city of Fitchburg. I think the last time we had it was in either Oak Meadow or Swan Creek at the time, so it's good to get them back. Currently, like I mentioned, we're in our Phase 3 with Fahey Fields, and the existing subdivision. We'd like to get your support for bringing in additional lands into the urban service area. And what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of a background. Our team with Ron Klaus with D'Onofrio Kotke, our engineer, the landowners, the owners of the property. This is something that's been in the works since the summer of 2018. It's not something that's just kind of all of a sudden us putting together a CARP-C application and getting to this point. We've actually met with CARP-C staff and the staff at the time that was in place here at City of Fitchburg, and kind of wanted to have an open forum as far as talking about bringing these lands in. And as a result of that, we've had, this past year, we've had about a half a dozen meetings with city staff to get us to this point. So it's been a well thought out process, and I'd like to thank Sonia and her team for being a part of that. And when we ask questions, she's been right on top of that for us all the step of the way. So it's been a good collaboration. We feel we've got a good plan in place. So I just kind of wanted to give you a brief update to how we got to this point. And with that, Ron Klaus is going to give a brief summary of the application that's in front of you. So with that, go ahead, Ron.
Thanks, Randy. Sonia, can you put up the neighborhood plan? I'd like to talk from that. Okay, so what we're looking at is the McGaw Park neighborhood plan adopted by the city in 2010. The subject parcel is right in here. It's approximately 80 acres with Fahey Fields that Randy mentioned just to the north. So the proposed land uses within this urban service expansion are medium density residential, lower density residential, R1, a block of institutional, and a small expansion of McGaw Park in that northeast corner. So that is what we are proposing with this urban service expansion. It would follow the McGaw Park plan. As you can see, the street network, this roundabout has been completed as part of Fahey Fields. We would be extending Nobel Drive through the project, heading east, also extending Fahey Glen to the west, and eventually Notre Dame Drive will be completed within Fahey Fields, and that's proposed to be a connector to the south. And again, our plan would follow that. We've got a very conceptual plan included as part of this for the city and CARP-C to review. That, of course, is subject to platting as the process goes on, but what we're proposing just follows the neighborhood plan. The CARP-C review and urban service expansion allows for sewer and water extensions, and they look at water quality issues. On this particular parcel, we're on top of the hill. So it sort of divides. Half of it will be sewered down Fahey Glen, into the Woods Hollow Interceptor. Approximately half will go down Notre Dame Drive into the Cyene sub-interceptor for sewer. There was a extension of the Woods Hollow Interceptor just completed, which gives it additional capacity here. It diverted some sewer on Lacey that had been going to the Cyene sub-interceptor, and that now is routed this way. So it's all following the plan. Water main for the subject parcel would be an extension of the local water main network. So, and that has been, those water mains have been stubbed to the south end of Fahey Fields. There will be an additional extension on Notre Dame Drive in phases 4 and 5 of Fahey Fields. Stormwater, again, because it's really the top of the hill here, the regional basins within the crossings have been designed to accept part of this, and then we will also be incorporating stormwater basins within the site itself to meet the City of Fitchburg ordinances. I mentioned the parks, small addition to McGaw here. The rest of the park commitment would be fee in lieu of land. Currently, this is all being farmed, and it'll continue to be farmed until there is development ready to go. There are no wetlands, forest, streams, no known archaeological resources, so there's really no reason to map any environmental corridors at this time. That will occur as parks and stormwater basins are developed. So that's it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer questions. And if it all seems like it's in line, we'd ask your support on this resolution.
Sonia, you want to give a staff report?
So this is a resolution in front of us tonight, and if the Plan Commission recommends approval and then the council subsequently approves it, it authorizes us to apply to CARP C. So we don't act, the Regional Planning Commission, Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, we don't actually have any authority to amend the urban service area boundary. So this is just our authorizing the application to be made to those other entities, CARP C and the DNR. But what we do review is consistency with our plans. So just an overview of the process of how we got to this point. I brought up some maps. This should look familiar. It's our future land use map with from the comp plan with our future urban growth area boundary identified. The pink is the urban service area line, and those colors that we've been looking at over the past year are future neighborhoods in future urban development areas. McGaw is identified here in this fuchsia pink color. 287 acres. So the first step was that was identified as a future urban development area in the plan. The next step was for detailed neighborhood planning to be done, and that was done through a public input process over a couple of years that took into account all of the different land uses that would make a complete neighborhood, logically planned for a road network, compatibility of land uses, stormwater, et cetera, appropriateness of this land in general for development. So that this map shows then the more detailed land uses that came out of that neighborhood planning process, still just south of this urban service area boundary. And this is the 80 acres that we're discussing tonight. And just a more detailed look at that land use map from the neighborhood plan. And then I also brought up an aerial photo to show you an example of other property that was included in the McGaw neighborhood plan just further north of this 80 acres. Followed that same process, but it's already been brought into the urban service area. So once that was approved by CARP C and the DNR, then the developer could begin their platting and zoning approval. So you can see the development happening here as a result of those entitlement processes through the city. And then further south, this is the area that we'd be discussing. So in terms of consistency, it does follow the neighborhood plan with the types of residential land uses proposed, as well as maintaining this 10-acre site for institutional land use, so it's consistent with the McGaw plan. And it's also consistent with other policies in the comp plan, and I referenced in my memo the 75 acres a year policy. So our comp plan says that we allow development at a rate of 75 acres a year, but it's on a rolling 5-year average. So there might be some years that we exceed that, but as long as over the rolling average of 5 years, we stay at 75 acres, that's consistent with the comp plan. And essentially what that amounts to then is allowing 20 years of development within the urban service area in total. So just zooming back out on this map again, the total area of the city's land uses that are within the urban service area is bound by this pink line. So that policy of 75 acres a year would accommodate 20 years of growth plus a 5-year flexibility factor, which essentially means you're just adding another 75 acres or over 5 years, so 375 total to accommodate for properties that might not be available for sale or not ready for development quite yet. So in total, that would allow about 1,800 acres within the urban service area. We know from our recent discussions we have about 1,200 acres within the urban service area, so the addition of this 80 would still keep us within that policy.
I do have one registration form from Michael Fahey. It's from Oregon, representing the Fahey family and registering in support of this matter. All right. Other questions, thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So just on the zoning part of it, so you mentioned R1, so low density residential, but I saw on the map it said medium density. Is there a reason for kind of that inconsistency? I don't know if that's a question for you guys or for staff, so.
I think it's just terminology.
Yeah.
What I was calling medium density is the neighborhood plan looks at a minimum of 10 DUs per acre, and the lower density a minimum of 5. So that is the goal we'd be shooting for.
So then that aligns with medium.
Yeah, so in some of our neighborhood plans, there are different land use categories than our general comp plan, and we defer to the neighborhood plans, so this one uses that slightly different terminology. Yep.
And then for the Notre Dame Drive, is that part of this plan? Because, I mean, obviously, as we can develop this, more people come in. Right now, there's only Micah and, what's that, Fahey? That's kind of out. So do we know what the plan is for completing the Notre Dame Drive at this point?
Well, I can tell you that within Fahey Fields here, we have completed a small portion of it.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a very small stub off of Lacey Road at the north end. Someday that will be connected through this parcel to where we've stubbed it here. And then in phases 4 and 5, we'll be extending Notre Dame to the southern limits of Fahey Fields. And that's where this parcel would pick it up. So eventually, it will run from Lacey to the south end.
Yeah, but so nothing right now, we don't have any idea when that's.
We don't know when it's going to happen, that connection. There was a project 2 years ago that came in to get approval and kind of has that mapped out where that goes through. I don't know when they are actually going to build that development. I've heard various things, but it's out there. It's supposed to be condos, and unsure of when the owner is going to pursue that, or I think he's trying to find someone to buy it and do it instead of him doing it himself at this point.
Okay.
But it's been a couple of years.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, Ed?
Just a question. Ron, what do the lines with the arrows signify?
Down, going to the south.
Right.
Yeah.
Per this legend, I believe it's road extensions.
So long term, the roads will continue because they're off of roads. All of them are off of roads, so they'll continue at some point in time. South is the idea, is the vision.
That's a lot of roads. Going across an area that, okay, I'm just curious. I mean, it goes across an area that is not even in the FUTA, in any FUTA.
Are some of them paths?
I'm
That's what I was
wondering,
wondering, if the orange is paths and the black is roads?
It actually said.
key says path. But even then, I don't know why you'd.
Oh, yeah, orange is
paths
path.
Proposed path, yeah. Those orange ones are paths.
Right, but,
The black is probably road.
yeah. Yeah, I had to look at that twice as well, Ed, and wondered, if that's just really long range into this, because this is long-term green.
Yeah, that's not in any of our future FUDAs at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that there would not be extensions of roads through there, and I'm not even sure why there'd be extensions of paths, because it's farmed. But I'm just curious, I guess I've noticed this before, and
I don't know why it's on there. They're gonna end right there and not really be stubbed in, because there's nothing imminent for quite a while at this point.
Are these from the neighborhood plan?
Yeah, there might be some supporting narrative in the McGaw neighborhood plan that would explain that in more detail. I would imagine it's just looking to promote connectivity to the future park and open space further south, and that when we do plat review, we would take a look at that and make sure that paths are appropriately platted to serve the neighborhood.
Okay.
Just a real random question. Anyone know what the government institutional space has ever been thought of in this area?
Sure. So the land use plan just identifies it as institutional, and then the text within the plan provides further detail identifying that as a school site.
Other comments at all?
I'll move to approve Resolution 236-19.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, going on to Resolution R 23719, granting a below-ground public utility easement. Do you want to speak to that?
Utility easement brought forward by Public Works, Outlot 9 in Terravesa. No concerns, it's just a formality, staff recommendations for approval.
All right.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded to approve the easement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, that's approved. How about another easement, it looks like?
This is also from Public Works. It would be a stormwater easement at the end of Newtone Street. Staff recommendations approval.
So moved.
Second.
All right, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, that one's approved as well. All right, now on to comp plan discussion. Do you want me to have public comments first? Okay. I have Phil first, if you'd like to come up and speak, Phil.
Good evening. I didn't participate in any of the meetings leading up to this comp plan completion, but just taking a review of some of the maps and some of the goals and objectives, and obviously there's been a lot of communication that's been thrown around looking for insight, that type of thing. So I just wanted to come and just mention a few things of just observations. I'm glad that the plan is being revised to the point that it is. There's a lot of competing interests all the time whenever we're doing these types of things. I'm still in favor, as I was 10 years ago, that development anywhere in the city is not necessarily a good thing. And I think one of the reasons is that what I wanted to emphasize tonight, and I think that, I've been hearing all our process through Terravesa, for instance, there was always, when there was opposition, it was always this 1,100 acres that was in the urban service area that should be developed first. And frankly, reality is that it's not going to be developed as the market dictates. It's going to be developed as the owners dictate it, because it is controlled by a handful of owners. So I think it's almost worth looking at that acreage in almost a separate pile of, you know that it's going to be developed at some point in time, and chances are very likely that there's going to be TID involved. And I think with the budget constraints and the pressures that the city has on it, it's not something that acreage should be looked upon as any short-term economic growth. It's great jobs are created, but I think that obviously the buildings and the development that's done is beautiful. It's very well done. It's long-term and everything else, but I think there's got to be a way that you are looking at also some of the shorter and more immediate and intermediate type of development that will inject revenue into your budget. And I'm not talking about blacktopping everything over, but I think that there's got to be there's a longer forecast, which some of those acres are in, and what can be done in the shorter term that doesn't take property off the tax roll, so to speak. And we used to do and provide an economic impact when we developed Harlan Hills and Swan Creek, Oak Meadow. We provided an estimate of tax revenue that would be generated from our developments. And new development does provide significant amount, estimating a lot of income for the city being generated from Terra Vesta at full build-out. But I think that's important for the city to be looking at is what is the economic impact of the next development? And it's not that difficult to calculate from the developer side. And I believe it should be on your checklist when something comes in to say, what is the impact of the city? And what can we expect to generate from this improvement? Looking at a lot of the community input, there's a lot of contradictory statements because you want, on one hand, entertainment and walkable neighborhoods. Well, that takes density, and density right now is not something that everybody's real excited about having. So I think that some of these are not going to work as well together as it may seem. There's going to have to be density and to have consumers living in this density to have mixed use. And I think Smart Code does deliver some of that, meets some of those objectives, but one doesn't come without the other. And I think that that's got to be a consideration. I know Mike Zimmerman's housing panel will probably have some research and some ideas regarding that over time. But that economic impact, whether these are mixed-use neighborhoods or typical suburban neighborhoods, I think is very, very important. And the flexibility in development is as well, I think, it depends upon who you're asking what the definition is of flexibility, right? I mean, things can change within a neighborhood plan, or if someone may think of flexibility of developing a neighborhood down by Highway M. And I think those are two very separate, very distinctly different things, and that is part then going back to, okay, what's the impact on the city, long-term as well as short-term. I think the 75 acres per year was a number that was, I think it was based on what the previous, I know you were around at the time, is based on historical development, say over the previous 5 or 10 years. And I think that was also diluted down from maybe it was 90 and down to 75. And I think that number is, I think it was more or less plucked out of the air, in my mind.
You could just wrap up quick.
What's that?
If you could start to wrap up, that'd be great. But
okay, well, that's fine. You have somewhere to go?
Well,
I'm kidding. I think that these shouldn't be carved in stone, and I would hope that maybe some consideration would be given to moving those out. The housing portion, the numbers of things, and I will wrap up, but there was a number of things that were asked by panels to have incorporated in the housing plan, to develop this, to develop that. Ask the people that are doing the development on how that can happen. And they'll be more than happy, I think, that they would be more than happy to help, and maybe that's part of Mike's plan as well. Lastly, this comp plan is approved. I hope that there's the political will to make it happen and to stick with it. There wasn't in all the cases. And there really needs to be, because this is a document that is going to be very important in bond ratings and as well as the economic future of the city. So I know just random comments, but I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Then Jeff, if you'd like to come up next.
Thank you all again for your time again tonight. Last Friday, I sent some of you an email after last Thursday's meetings, and I then forwarded that to all of you on the board, so hopefully you had a chance to take a peek at that. But it had regarding our hope to potentially build a new wedding barn in Fitchburg off Burn Road. We'd be happy to elaborate on anything in the email and discuss why we think this is a potentially beautiful option for the city of Fitchburg, but we know right now that's not where we're at. Right now, we're just looking at the comprehensive plan and what you think might be the vision for Fitchburg. I guess right now, tonight, we're just asking to live another day, because we realize right now we're not talking zoning changes or anything like that, but what we are looking for is enough of a change in the comprehensive plan such that if you think this concept maybe has a little bit of merit, or it might be a neat addition to the rural portion of Fitchburg, that you'd like to at least discuss it and have a good discussion about what it could be, and so that maybe 5 to 6 months from now we could come back to you with something more specific and actually consider some rezoning options or conditional permits or whatever it is necessary. We think this site is perfect for the venture itself. It's a beautiful site. We think it's perfect for the visitors that would come to it. We think it's a perfect site for the city of Fitchburg. I wish you could all actually go walk this property with me, and so that you could share on what a beautiful site it is. And in the meantime, that's why I attached a couple pictures to the email that I sent you folks. It's something that really could be a gem for the city, a landmark, a jewel, I would like to say. So right now, tonight, all we're asking for is for you to consider making whatever necessary changes you might need to make to the comprehensive plan so that it could, again, we could live another day and take a look at this in another few months when the plan's approved, and we could come back to you with some rezoning requests. So I'd entertain any questions you might have, or maybe it's part of a overall discussion later or something like that, but appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
All right.
All right. I also have some written comments from Jay Hockmuth from Fitchburg, asking me to read some bold sections here. Hello, Planning Commission members. Thanks for the opportunity to offer comments on agenda item 5K. Staff should be commended for all their work to get the draft comprehensive plan ready for the public hearing at the January 21st Planning Commission meeting. Nevertheless, revisions to the wording of the draft plan dated 12/17/19 will likely be offered tonight. During your deliberations, I hope you decide to vote for the following revisions. On page 416, add the following sentence at the end of the paragraph that defines low-density residential, and comparable sentence at the end of the paragraph that defines medium-density residential. The maximum number of housing units allowable on a parcel designated LDR is 5 units per acre times the net acreage of the parcel, which is the gross acreage, as determined by certified survey, minus the acreage on the parcel of any navigable water bodies, wetlands, wetland buffer zones, and publicly owned streets, highways, and parks. On page 5.3, modify the wording of item 2 to read: the planning department mails the notice to property owners of record within 300 feet of the affected parcels at least 15 days prior to the date of the Planning Commission public hearing. If less than 20 owners are located within 300 feet, the notice shall be mailed to owners of record within 500 feet of the parcels. The notice shall include the street address of the parcels and a summary of the proposed amendment. On page 5.4, modify the second and third sentences in the first paragraph to read: major updates may occur more frequently than once every 10 years. However, it is recommended the major updates occur no more frequently than once every 5 years or as necessary, as determined by the Common Council, because a major update will provide a significant net benefit to the city. Council should determine the scope of major updates after consulting with the Planning Commission. And on page 415, map 4.2, reduce the size of the parcel that the Oregon School District has requested be added to the urban service area from 107 acres to the acreage reasonable anticipated to be needed by the Oregon School District for buildings and grounds to accommodate students through the year 2040. All right. That is what I have for public comments at this time. Sonia, I don't know, do you want to talk about the plan and what we're going to do here?
So the agenda includes a list of items that we wanted to specifically get through. I do have comments, can take questions on the wedding barn, on the 75 acres a year policy, on the residents' comments just read as we go, but I think it might make sense to go through the agenda items as listed in order. That works for you. So first is revisions to the goals, objectives, and policies. So Wade walked you through these all at the last meeting and then made changes following based on your feedback. So we'll just go through those again and show you how they've been addressed. So starting on page 308 of the packet is the first change. And again, these are all highlighted in red. There was no change to this one. It's regarding housing, including promoting those that provide for diversity and cost, tenure, and type. That's the same thing we looked at last week. And stop me if you have questions as we go. On page 324 is the next policy. Again, there were no changes to this one from last week. Identify areas that are most appropriate for mixed-use centers and explore opportunities to incentivize said development in these areas.
Sonia, one clarification I'd request on 1.3.4, just so this doesn't get misconstrued. Identify areas that are most appropriate for agricultural research, ag development, and ag technology.
That's a very good catch.
This will surely get misconstrued otherwise. And I'm very supportive of policy 1.3.3 as written.
Okay. And on that note, I'm also going to pass out a handout. These are some suggested changes to just 3 specific policies that didn't make it into the draft plan last week, and one of them specifically references the wedding barns. And I'll try to highlight these as we go. So we covered the first one. The next change on this page was in the middle of the page here, support agriculture and ag-related and ag-dependent businesses in ag areas with minimal impact on surrounding properties. And then the one that Ed just commented on, I would support that change. Any other questions here? These 2 changes were proposed by Alder Clowder. So they have been incorporated. Policy 2.14 here shows review commercial and industrial development proposals in an expeditious manner as a means to promote and facilitate economic development. I have no concerns with incorporating that. It's something that we always strive to do where projects are consistent with the comp plan. And then the next one is respond to market demand for new commercial and industrial developments through the review and approval of these developments as they are proposed. That was also brought forward by Clowder.
I have a question on that one. I don't really understand what that means. Does it mean that we approve everything that is proposed in response to market demand? I mean, doesn't 2.2.3 cover this adequately? I mean, recognizing the need for additional industrial land? I don't know what 2.1.5 means.
I don't know if you want to address that, Tom. I mean, it seems like stuff we do already. I mean, if these things come forward, we do respond to those. I know that, I don't know if you want to explain it further, Tom.
Well, I think it kind of speaks for itself. I mean, something comes to the city in reference to a plastic company, and the plastic company has 300 jobs, and it's a good fit for the city, it's kind of up to the city council and the plan commission. It's, you know, it doesn't hurt to clarify those type of things. And as far as those two, it just kind of backs up, like Sonia was saying, it just kind of backs up what I think a few of us, not everybody, I admit that, has said in the past.
So, but what do you mean by through the review and approval of these developments? Do you mean when they are proposed or as they are proposed?
When are?
Oh, when they are
Yeah.
proposed.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
make more sense.
When
That would be
something
clear.
is proposed.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we could change that to when, I would.
Okay.
So Edward,
I
you're getting,
thought you meant that we were going to review them as they are proposed and approve them in that manner.
Oh.
Right. Okay.
Kind of when.
When they are proposed.
Whenever
Okay.
that happens.
Yep. Okay.
I can't tell you, I mean, it's kind of open. That
Yeah. Yeah.
you're trying to get have a driving force be responding to market demand. Ed, you want to make sure that we are not saying this is a rubber stamp that everything
Exactly.
before this comes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's kind of how I read it. It says, through the review and approval of these developments, it kind of implies that we're going to approve them regardless of what comes forward, which
That's how I read it too.
I don't agree with. I mean, obviously, we need to review them.
But I think Tom's
I want-
original verbiage was
Yeah.
better, but I mean, it probably doesn't fit the overall verbiage of the old document, but the be responsive to market demand was the driving.
I don't,
Yeah.
let me clarify that. I can clarify that pretty easy. I've never said we can't jump through the hoops. What I mean by that is the process it goes through, the neighborhood plan. I don't think I've ever said, just like, let me give you an example, just like Edgewood coming along, that still has to go through the process. It still has to go through a neighborhood plan. You might have heard me support it, but that doesn't mean we don't go through the right process.
So,
Ed, am I hearing that if
Yeah.
you made that slight change, you're more comfortable then with that wording?
yeah, that would make me more comfortable, and maybe, Zach, to your concern, through the review and consideration for approval.
Yeah. That's what
But I mean, I agree. I mean,
I understand what you're getting at.
I
It's
do
just
too.
kind of the way it's worded that
Yeah.
throws me off a little bit because it kind of implies that approval is part of the review process, which it may not necessarily be.
That's fair.
But I think, responding to market demands and making sure that we're, listening to what's happening is key.
Everyone good? All right.
Okay, so I can make that change for when and consideration of approval. Backing up, just so we're going sequentially, I wanted to address another policy change suggested by Alder Clowder. This was on page 324 of the full packet, and there was some discussion last week. Policy 1.3.3. It currently reads, avoid establishment of non-agriculturally related commercial and business development outside the urban service area. Tom's proposed language can be found at the bottom of the packet, but I did not change this. I think there were some good comments by the Plan Commission. Just the intent of this section is really for preservation of ag land, whereas we have other policies that support economic development and job development in appropriate areas. Okay, back to page 326. This we didn't change from last week. We wanted to just add that language that supports industrial, ensure the city has an adequate supply of land for industrial development.
Sorry, Sonia. I'm assuming you'll remove the period.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you. Yep. And then there was a question on this one. The wording is a little bit confusing, so I'm on page 327, the last policy there in red. This is one that I've addressed on the handout, which I'll open up here. So I'm suggesting removing that language, which is copied here. This is at the bottom of the handout, and replacing it with 2 separate policies, if you think this makes sense. So the first one, the first phrase of the existing policies says develop and implement an economic development positioning analysis. Our City in Motion Forward Fitchburg document is our strategic economic development plan. And that's been developed. So now we're really in the stage of implementation. So I've suggested, and this language actually came directly from page 5 of City in Motion. It says, implement the city's economic development positioning framework as a strategic, action-oriented complement to the comprehensive plan. I liked this language because economic development and planning should be working together, and I think that good planning often leads to good economic development. And that City in Motion document is, I think, really good because it encourages things like place-based economic development, strengthening of our existing neighborhoods. It focuses on redevelopment and infill, things along those lines. So the fact that the plan itself talks about complementing the comprehensive plan rather than pursuing development opportunities that are not consistent with it, I think is good language to incorporate. And then the second part asked for a desired architectural analysis. Still not entirely sure where that came from, but perhaps it means looking at urban design guidelines in appropriate areas. So when we talk about architecture, you're often looking at the building mass and form that you might want to encourage. They're often done through guidelines rather than ordinance. So if you'd like, we can incorporate that as a separate line, which says develop architectural design guidelines in appropriate areas, such as redevelopment areas or along major corridors. And I incorporated the language in that way because of the objectives and goals that it's sort of nested under is really talking about business development projects, solid tax base, sensitivity to the environment, et cetera.
Looks good.
Okay. Now we're into recreation. Page 337, no change on this one, supported by our park and open space plans, et cetera. Explore opportunities for public art and other prominent recreational amenities. Wade touched on this last week. We didn't really have a goal that specifically addressed the library and senior center service and population.
And let me just ask a question there on that one. In reference to the seniors, weren't they also talking about transportation a little bit in reference to, they made some comments about transportation, about busing, about the rail line. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I think lots of good comments in there that are supported in throughout our existing policies, things like the transportation section, which I think is next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take it next.
Yeah,
take it next.
yeah.
That's fine. Sorry.
Page 354 of the whole packet, maximize use of existing transportation investments. Looks like we've added prioritize investments to support city residents, employers, and visitors over those that are just passing through. So trying to create place, trying to create destination uses, not just a convenience pass-through community where the adjacent land uses don't matter. The primary purpose is not just shepherding people through our city, but addressing all passers through. Page 355. We talked about this last week. Explore opportunities to expand ride-sharing options in the city and stay current with various emerging trends, transportation, that'll be fixed, that typo, including but not limited to those related to use of personal electric vehicles and the development of autonomous vehicles. So I think comments that came from primarily Transit and Transportation Committee, possibly aging well. I don't think I missed anything on there, but I know we talked about autonomous vehicles a little bit. Page 356, implement bicycle sharing facilities in appropriate locations to include electronic bikes. Added this clarification that when we're talking about sidewalks, it's all in accordance with the city's bike and ped plan. Per feedback from last week, examine dedicated busways, including regional bus rapid transit. So that line that's planned for the Fish Hatchery Road corridor. if rail-based options are not fully feasible. So again, I think the goal of adding that language was to move beyond just rail transit and also explore other transit opportunities. All right, so this one's new. Support exploration of development of an airport facility in an appropriate location in the city. So this came up last week as well. I know there's been some conversations just on the feasibility of that, things that I'm really not privy to or know any background on. It's just a little bit interesting. I think our ag zoning areas, so exclusive ag zoning covers most of our rural areas, and that includes lists of permitted and conditional uses. One of the conditional uses includes like transportation facilities or utilities, for example. So a solar farm is a utility. That's a conditional use in an ag exclusive district. An airport could be a transportation facility in an ag exclusive district. So the key words are appropriate location in the city. If this is something of great regional benefit or benefit to the city, public benefit, economic development, whatever it is, and something's brought forward, it would only be explored in appropriate locations in the city. It would require approval of a conditional use permit. And we'd want to make sure that it's not hindering other areas planned for development or planned for preservation. For example, prime ag soils, or not locating the facility within planned future urban development areas.
So this could be a conditional use in ag zoning, so this would not even represent a major amendment to the comp plan if an airport were being built?
I think calling it out specifically sort of overcomes that hurdle because we do have the policies that talk about limiting development in the rural areas to only that which is consistent with rural residential development. This would essentially be an add-on to that conversation, saying that if there is an appropriate location in the city for an airport, you would consider that in balance with that other policy.
So that becomes a transportation facility then that could be done under existing zoning as a conditional use?
Right, and the adding of this policy would allow that to happen. If we didn't have this, our policy currently says only that which is consistent with rural residential development criteria.
Okay.
I'm going to come back to that. Sonny, could you go back to the bus rapid transit?
Yep.
I just want to examine dedicated busways, including regional bus transit. I just want to bring this to your attention in the city. Anybody watching as well. The city of Madison I've followed this, not to every T and every I, but I followed this pretty much. What the situation is, just so you know, is the bus rapid transit situation is where a community they apply for grants in reference to these buses. The buses, if you want a further visual on them, I like to say they're like the ones in Milwaukee maybe where there's one bus and another, it's an accordion. I don't know how else to say that. It's like an accordion bus, and and the situation with this is right now the city of Fitchburg, we don't have the buses. We don't have the grant. Are we planning for it on Fish Hatchery Road? Possibly, which I'm not against, but just so you're aware of it, we don't have the buses. The mayor of Madison has really gone out on this, and mayor may know more about it, but she has really gone out on the limb on this one and want this bus rapid transit and put a lot of money into it, but here we go. They don't have the buses. So it's, to me, a little bit, and I'm not against this. I'm not against this unless we want to say when buses arrive, but just so you know, we don't have them. Now we'll go to the airport.
Can we get back to that one second?
Any comment?
Yeah, policy 346 talks about a regional transportation authority. And I think would be where that would fit in more than anything. I think it's a good idea, but I think we're going to need more than just Fitchburg for a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's never going to be a BRT without just in Fitchburg by any means. And unfortunately, there's some laws, like state laws, that we can't do regional transit authorities anymore, which really hampers communities like Dane County, frankly.
Yeah, was that the taxing part of it? Because it was authorized to tax up to a certain percentage.
There's a lot of parts to it, but we can't establish one at this
just
point.
went out in Walker's term, I think.
Yeah.
So you're saying you need the articulated buses to be in the BRT? Is that what I'm understanding you're saying, Tom?
Yeah.
Or it can't be a normal?
Can I put in my own words?
Sure.
Right now, we can talk about it. I'm good with that, don't get me wrong, but we don't have them. And all I'm saying is the cart's before the horse. If we get them, and I'm not against the wording, don't get me wrong, but I just want to bring to your attention, we don't have them.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand. So we need that specific infrastructure to compete in that. Got it.
Madison needs like $100 million before they can implement this.
Gotcha.
So it's a little, it's not false information, but I've just been following this topic to know that, and will it be used? How will it be used? I passed a bus yesterday on Rimrock Road, and there are 2 people on it. Good for those 2 people. You know.
What time was it?
So they need minibuses instead of articulated buses.
Right.
Or
automated.
Or whatever.
So I guess your question is, will we have it in the next 10 years?
Maybe.
And that's a good question. Maybe.
And that's why it's
10 years will
examined.
come.
I think to me the key is examine it.
I can tell you right now that, well, I don't know if I'll be at the bus stop. I don't know about this guy, but, you know.
He's still in boot?
He fixed his foot. He'll be riding his bike. He'll be riding his bike. Can I see the airport? Let me tell you what happened here. Again, it's just information. I like it in there. If it's never used, okay. Here's the deal. The former mayor and 2 alders and the city staff went to Truex Field, or had a meeting, forget that. They had a meeting, and what the story was, as it's related, this wasn't far-fetched. It was a situation with Epic out there and the air traffic around Dane County. And don't ask me about the jets, but that came into play if they would come into Truex Field, that the airspace would be more congested. And this was a situation where some people, and say it again loud and clear, I wasn't at the meeting, people from Truex Field said, you know, it's not so stupid. It's a future thing. Don't get me wrong. It's not tomorrow. It's not next week. You know, I'd say don't Promega, don't buy an aircraft. Not quite yet. You know,
They already have 3 or 4.
No, okay. Okay. But the time that was put in by these 2 alders, and well, I'll tell you, it was Carpenter and Julia and the mayor, and they had quite a discussion, I understand, and that's where that came from. Just to make it, Mayor, do you know anything further about it, or no? Maybe?
I know they met, and there's a couple areas that might work. There's supposedly a need. Sounds like Truax is getting busier and busier, and it's hard to accommodate some of the other stuff that people want to do out there. So looking at the area, I think people look at that part of it, you know, maybe the southern part of Fitchburg, Oregon, other places like that as a possibility to balance out where airports are. There's a whole lot of stuff that have to go into doing it before anything like that happened. That's probably not something that happen in the next 10 years, maybe the next 20, maybe planning starts the next 10 years if that's something that people really want to push, but there's a lot of unknowns to that.
I agree. There is. That's what
I've never participated in a process to cite an airport, but I would hope that there's a larger planning process.
It's really easy for me to say this to you. You may be retired.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Buy some land, get a conditional use and build it. It's
Yeah,
really
right.
that simple, Sonia.
Take it on, yep. So in general, though, when we talk about like comp plans too, I think one of the benefits of planning and zoning is that people, like if I'm going to buy some property and build my retirement home, I have a reasonable expectation of the uses that are going to be possibly allowed next to me. So again, if this was something that the city would want to pursue, it should be long into the future so that people can make decisions appropriately. In Resources, Energy, and Communications on page 375. This came up last week. Continue to enforce the stormwater control ordinance and adopt additional management mechanisms as demand dictates and as policies and methods involve, including but not limited to development of a drainage district per state statute. We were talking about Lake Barney, I think, last week. This doesn't really change anything, it just identifies it and acknowledges it.
Yep, thanks.
Yep. Halfway down the plan, we talked about that specificity of the tree advisory committee. Nothing was changed here. I'm not sure if there was any follow-up, but again, just the recommendation from those experts.
There is on the page prior to that a stray parenthesis.
Okay, yeah, I think I saw that.
Okay.
Right there, yep. A few typos I'm seeing in here as well. And then this one on page 376, some typos, but we changed, we took out woody invasive shrubs to general invasives on public lands. This is the same, develop a comprehensive sustainability plan rather than just sort of these one-off items. Broadband, we talked about this last week, so again, specifying available to all city residents and businesses. I think the comments were rural residents and broadband in those areas, making sure that's a possibility. All right, now I'm in page 388. This is the same policy as last week. Continue to explore opportunities and partnerships to develop neighborhood center type facilities. Wade mentioned there was a lot of support in our various outreach meetings that maybe it's not just commercial centers, but just neighborhood centers, third places, gathering places where people can go besides their home and work. This was added per last week, the comments about wanting to make sure that we receive and review comp plans as they're updated from adjacent communities. And then finally, the land use chapter. Page 428. Preserve and enhance the rural character of land outside the current urban service area. This is that whole idea of our farm field growth areas. When we talk about growth in farm fields, it's not necessarily development growth, but growth which enhances our ag uses already there. So we're both preserving and encouraging other opportunities for our rural and farming population. Policy 1.22, this is on the handout. So we clarified how corridors would be handled. In our urban service area now, our wetlands and streams are buffered by 75 feet. In the rural area, they're buffered by 300 feet. And then as those go through an urban service area amendment, environmental corridors are established by CARPC. So you heard from the applicant earlier today where they said they're not establishing any environmental corridors within that Fahey South because there weren't any natural resources. Well, that's typically when you would do it. So if you're going down from 300 feet into a more urban condition. CARPC agreed with our interpretation that we could reduce that buffer below due to the changing conditions. So why we have a 300-foot buffer in the rural area, I think could still be elaborated upon, but I think part of it is just the adjacent ag uses, manure spreading, nutrient runoff, and things like that that would impact our waterways. And then Northeast Neighborhood, for example, I'm sure they had a 300-foot buffer before they were brought into the urban service area, and then when that urban service area was approved by CARPC, they established the new corridors. The minimum policy is 75 feet, but it could be negotiated, so it could be more. And in that area, there were high-quality wetlands, so the buffers were larger. So I would suggest adding this language just to clarify. This is the same, objective 2.1. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Are you saying reduce the 300 feet? I'm sorry, go back.
Yeah.
I guess,
So it's just clarifying what the policy would be if we take an area that's in rural now and has a 300-foot buffer, say it's in a FUTA, once that's brought in for urban conditions, it could be reduced. Just clarifying so that we don't have to ask the question later or apply this literally saying, now you're in the urban service area, you're in urban developed neighborhood, but you still have to have the 300-foot buffers.
you know, I'm with you, but isn't it always better to be on the safe side than an other side? In other words, how can you go wrong by making the buffer larger? You know, you could say 75 feet. I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. You know, maybe you don't have to go. I'm not going to rely. I'm not sure I want to rely on CARPC, but the fact is I like the idea, like just that by doing that. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. Too, maybe you can help me out on that. In reference to, I like the bigger buffer. How can you go wrong by informing more neighbors, telling more neighbors, contacting neighbors? I don't think you can go wrong. If you go short, I'll just make up short. If you go shorter and you don't have to go 300 feet, or so you can go 75 feet because CARPC told me so. We're in Dane County, but I'm not on the CARPC board. And if I was on that board, I'd say bigger is better. How does it hurt the neighbors? Maybe I'm.
Yeah, this isn't notifying people. This is just saying if you have like a small stream, you can't do any development within 300 feet when it's in a rural area. Then if it's in like a FUTA and someone says, oh, I'm going to develop this, now when they're doing their planning, instead of making them stay at 300 feet away from the rivers, they can have housing come up to 75 feet. And the 300-foot buffer is really for environmental concerns to help protect those streams. It doesn't really have anything to do with notifying people who live by there.
My fault. I was mixing it up with neighborhoods.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry.
Similar. There's a lot here. No problem.
I'm still holding my same comment.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think there's going to be times when you do continue to want to have wider ones, and this doesn't preclude you from doing that.
Yeah. We don't really spell it out, though, do we?
And I think there's some DNR requirements. I don't think it's all CARPC.
But I mean, on ours, because that's the biggest part of development cost is land.
Yeah.
And that would pretty much kill development anywhere near there if we were going to say it was 300 feet. But on the other, and I agree, I understand 100%. But I'm wondering, wouldn't it be better if we at least had something in place that would sort of define what's what?
Yeah, and then this is also the general comprehensive plan. So as we do our detailed neighborhood planning, if environmental conservation and protection of those natural resources is important to that neighborhood and the city and those neighbors, you would take a more detailed look at the wetlands and the streams that are there. So again, Northeast Neighborhood, really high quality wetlands. I don't know exactly where's where, but Murphy's Creek and Swan Creek, high quality streams and wetlands versus something that's maybe a degraded wetland that's been tilled in ag practices.
Wasn't, who am I thinking of that talked about the stream to the east? Oh, he passed away. Who am I thinking of?
Leo.
Phil Lewis.
Oh, Phil Lewis.
Wasn't he, what was his?
He worked on the Nine Springs.
All right.
That's for another day. That's for another day.
Yeah.
All right, moving along.
No change here. We want to promote investment along heavily trafficked corridors for infill and redevelopment. And the wedding barn issue is in this chapter, page 4. Page 430 of the packet. This is the policy 2.3.4. It says, retain the rural landscape of Fitchburg by limiting development outside the urban service area to that which is consistent with rural residential development criteria. This allows only the ag and open space uses and those scattered rural residential sites that we sometimes approve, the new 1.5 acre lots. This doesn't talk about rural subdivisions on septic for, multiple homes, that sort of thing. So it's limiting this, preserving ag, et cetera. The goal of this was was to specifically not allow commercial businesses because those should be directed in appropriate zoning districts and land uses, as we've been discussing in the urban service area. So this also precludes then an event center or a wedding reception hall. So this is the policy that would currently prohibit the wedding barn from moving forward.
Sonia, do we need to tie this back to the language on page 324, which encourages ag development, ag technology type facilities?
Yeah. Are you saying that that other policy could support development of a wedding barn? Or,
no, I'm not. The wedding barn aside.
Oh, right.
I just want to I just don't want these two to conflict with each other and have this one say, well, it's only stuff on the DRRDC, whereas elsewhere we're saying, well, we're anticipating that there could be some ag-related uses, kind of like the Mackenzie barn.
Yeah.
Proposal we looked at.
Last month at the corner of Seminole, the education facilities.
That's out in Fish Hatchery Road, going out toward M.
Yeah.
Right, but that use was very specifically ag-related.
But it's screaming wedding. I know what you said, and it's great, and it's perfect, and I think she'll do all that. My argument is, what if he said education and had weddings too, right? It's screaming to host weddings there.
Yeah, but she says she's not going to do it, and that's not part of the
conditional use
either to do that.
Fair.
So this limits development to the RRDC, but it doesn't trump or preclude the uses in the existing zoning district. So exclusive ag would allow for those things that you were talking about regardless of this policy, like ag technology and ag whatever, as long as it's consistent with that ag exclusive zoning district. And those agricultural related uses are defined by state statute chapter 91 for farmland preservation. So it specifically identifies what ag use means. So ag use and rural residential development criteria, but no commercial businesses that aren't ag related and that aren't RRDC.
So that's why I just wonder if we should reference, just so that
it's
clear reference back to, I think it was 1.3.4 on page 324.
On page 324.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I would support.
Okay. So I guess the other question is whether we want a proliferation of non-ag related uses in the rural area.
Right.
And I don't know where you draw the line, or that becomes a slippery slope. I don't.
I'd like to think that there's not a market for 10 or 20 of them. I guess that doesn't mean people won't build them, but maybe there's a lot more demand than I expect. Because I think right now there's a few uses possible, like a greenery, and there's like 3 or 4 things that are possible right now under this. Now, again, you don't need 3 or 4 greeneries in an area, things like that. So it's really, I think, saying a wedding barn type facility would be another one of those permitted uses, possibly.
But it's not ag related, and I guess where I've seen it, it's at least a situation where you're taking an existing barn that may otherwise deteriorate and saving it. And maybe there's something to be said for that. I'm not arguing for that, but I don't know what else might be proposed if we open up this possibility.
So I can present some of the research that I did, but you're raising the exact issue, and that's why this hadn't been addressed previous to this meeting, is because it's that slippery slope issue and trying to find a way that would narrowly allow for this if it's something that the city supported. So did some research. DATCAP, the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, they control the farmland preservation rules. And Ed just mentioned he'd seen it in most cases, conversion of an existing barn. So DATCAP confirmed that. So in your exclusive ag zoning district, they would allow for use of an existing barn, like a real 1940s barn, for a wedding event center. Where they would draw the line is that no new structures or improvements could be made. So if you're looking to retrofit that existing structure with restrooms and a kitchen and all of those sorts of things, or a new barn, for example, that's not something that could be allowed under the exclusive ag zoning. And exclusive ag, so our AX, that's our certified preservation district. So we are not at liberty to sort of change that. So that was cause for concern for me because I don't think that the rest of the plan doesn't support rezoning to another district. If we were going to accommodate it, it would be our goal as staff to accommodate it under ag zoning so that we're not rezoning to something like a business district that would open the floodgates to interpretation or other projects. So our first attempt at looking at DATCAP, I was a little bit nervous about that. I think it's also that's generally consistent with other communities. We looked into Walworth County, Jefferson County. They also accommodate those existing barns. But we do have this small lot ag zoning district that is not a certified preservation district by DATCAP. And that includes conditional uses. I'm not entirely sure of the whole history of it, but it also accommodates things like small scale ag. And we think that since it's not an ag certified district by DATCAP, there might be a little bit more flexibility there for us to consider a conditional use. And it depends really on the policy question of if this is something the city wants to support. And I think there are arguments that could be made in terms of a wedding barn is dependent on an agrarian landscape or on a rural landscape. They wouldn't be proposing a wedding barn if it weren't in the middle of a rural ag area. So that in and of itself sort of precludes a lot of other uses. We talk in our ag plan about agritourism or enhancing. We talked earlier about that policy, uses that enhance the rural area or make it its own sense of place. So I think there are a lot of policies there that can support this use. Our greatest concern was just limiting the potential for other interpretations. So.
I do know, just to speak to the reusing, repurposing an old barn versus a new barn, I know the fire department has said in the past that they have a lot more concerns about repurposing an old barn with entrances and exits, and there's no fire suppression. I mean, their purpose would be new, but I think, one of their concerns they have, especially with big groups of people in these barns, is, you get 200 people in a really old, really dried out wood barn, and something unfortunate happens, how well can those people get out? So there's a safety component to that as well. I don't know how that factors in, but I know that's another piece to the puzzle, which isn't necessarily planning, but another concern.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've talked a little bit in circles, and I'm not sure I'm completely following. For the people that are sitting here that just spoke, what does this mean for them?
Yeah, I'll propose the potential solution now, and before I do that, just a note on the public feedback received on this. So the CETA memo included at the end of the packet. I don't know exactly what detailed discussion they had on the issue, but they did specifically list support for wedding barns. And then we also held those 5 outreach meetings throughout the city, including what we called Zone 5 that incorporated a lot of the rural residents. So people that attended that meeting, on their worksheet, they were asked the specific question whether the city should allow new agricultural related uses such as wedding barns, dairy stores, wineries, and farm cafes on agricultural lands. And so a lot of the public input that we received would support those types of uses. Like for example, there were 14 that just said yes, and then a whole handful of other yeses with qualifying statements like yes as long as they support or enhance agriculture in Fitchburg. Or maybe, but does this mean bright lights, athletic fields, paved parking lots? So those are things that you would have to review and consider public input in a conditional use permit review situation. So in general, I think it's good that we did get that public input on the question specifically. So this is what we suggest. Again, this is the black existing language, and then in order to accommodate, you could add or uses which may be allowed in agricultural zoning districts that are integral to and which maintain the rural landscape and are supported by the city's agricultural plan. The integral to language speaks to what I mentioned about the wedding barn wouldn't exist if it weren't part of a rural landscape, and which maintain the rural landscape and are supported by the ag plan. So we're making sure that we're still supporting rural preservation and things like that. So if this type of policy language were added, it would then allow us to pursue a zoning code amendment where we could maybe talk about the definition of wedding barn a little bit more specifically. So that's what this says. It says it would require subsequent revision of an agricultural zoning district to potentially allow wedding barns as a conditional use. That would go through the normal public hearing procedure for an ordinance amendment by the Plan Commission and Council, and only after the ordinance was amended could a conditional use permit application be brought forward, and then there would again be public input on that specific proposal. The suggested ordinance amendment could affect only the small lot ag zoning district, and we already covered that. And some of the other projects that I reviewed, like a barn in town of Pleasant Springs near Stoughton called the Fields Reserve. This is a brand new facility. That property it contained covenants and restrictions and a deed restriction as part of the approval that said it could only be a wedding barn. If it ever, this is a zoning concern with these types of uses too, if it ever went out of business and devolved into just a vacant structure, we're not allowing something that's not integral to the ag landscape. It's not gonna be a club or a music venue or something that's going to create, zoning issues or nuisance down the road. That was the same approach for Barnwood, another new facility in the town of Blooming Grove, approved by City of Madison in their extraterritorial zoning, actually right adjacent to Fitchburg. So they also had the deed restriction as part of their recommendation.
Do I get feedback on this one, maybe? Thoughts by people on this?
I like that you have the verbiage from the public meeting, because we talk a lot and we this immediate thing that we think about is wedding barns, but wineries. If we had a vintner who wants to start growing grapes in Fitchburg out in the middle of the country and have that be a spot that we need to allow, I think we need to allow for that in some capacity. And obviously it shouldn't just be a rubber stamp, but if there's a way that you can control that through conditional use, I fully support it.
So a vineyard is agriculture. That doesn't require a conditional use if you're actually gonna put in a commercial,
Yeah, but if you're selling it, if you're gonna do a tasting room and a...
Yeah, Botham or those guys.
So that would be an ag-related use, because viniculture is agriculture. Growing grapes is agriculture.
Are you arguing, Stephen, that it would be the tasting room and all that,
I didn't know
retail part of it would fall in?
Totally growing them, but I thought if you're going to do a tasting room and, and how much do you start serving food, how much of that is actually still considered agriculture? If you're a small crop farmer and you open up a field to table type of place, or you have farm cafes, where is the distinction then, I guess, between...
If you have one vine growing in the backyard, does that mean that...
Yeah, well, because a good example is Drumlin Ridge, most of their stuff isn't grown there. So if I'm importing grapes, but I live on a vineyard, the grapes are all rotten, and I make my wine here and I sell it here, and I put my label on it, how much of that is farming? I'm doing more shipping in and out than farming. So
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we at least allow for the possibility, and especially in a 10-year plan, that this could be entertained for people who have just presented before us.
To me, Upwood Garden is the right model. I mean, I think that's kind of what you want to see. They're actually growing the produce there. There's a certain amount of processing done on site, there's sales done on site, there's tasting, there's events. You know, that supports agriculture. And in a winery, if they're really growing their grapes there, that would maybe
Even
support agriculture
Wallersheim
too.
buys a lot of their grapes.
Mhm.
They grow a decent amount, but they buy, I think, more than they grow.
Yeah.
But, you know, if they are successful, you want that. I mean, you might get so successful they couldn't grow as much as they need. And there's varieties that don't grow in Wisconsin anyway that they might need.
Yeah, and if all you're gonna do is buy grapes from somewhere else, that can be in the urban service area. There's no reason to do it out in the country.
Right. Other thoughts at all?
So in a perfect world, they would be growing grapes and have this facility that they manufacture the grapes and then have a wedding there every now and then, right? That would be the perfect world, right?
There'd be a sassy cow down the road, too.
But I generally like her wording. I have a hard time saying no to this, but I don't know why I have a hard time saying no, if that makes any sense.
Tom?
You know, this is in my district. It's in District 4. Why is everything in District 4?
You got so much land.
That's where the land is the cheapest.
2/3 of the
Half
city.
of Fitchburg is
All-
District
All
4.
the cheap land is in District 4, Tom. That's why everybody wants to build there.
See, you're driving down property.
I'm going to buy a condo in 2. You know, I have to tell you, this is popular. I think you'd agree with me. It is a popular situation. You know, here we go again. Here goes Tom again. Yeah, but this will bring, I mean, something like this too brings, I still say it, it brings hotel rooms, it brings food, it brings people to our gas stations, it brings PR, as well as, you know, that it does happen in Fitchburg. I can't help but to share this with you, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I know somebody that went through a Catholic grade school and a Catholic high school and a Catholic university, and they were married in the barn. It's out there. It's out there, and I'm not. It's out there, and I know there's one real popular. Did I hear you say, Sonia, at Stoughton? Or there's one down in Stoughton. 5 years ago, I was at a wedding down there at the barn in Stoughton. This is a popular situation, and I'd like to leave the language there.
I think when we talk about flexibility, I think this adds some flexibility. I think, you know, we're going to have to be careful with what we approve, and that's why it's conditional uses, and there's going to be restrictions on whatever someone wants to do. But I do like having that as an option and giving certain people other opportunities and other things that they could possibly do. So I guess I'm okay with the change as well. Other comments at all?
Were you guys, Ed and Tom specifically, I don't want to date you, but were you guys planning when Quivies opened? I know that's a while ago. No?
I wasn't. That was quite a while ago.
Ed's older than me. Asked Ed these questions.
Sure. Where I was getting at with that is they have weddings, they throw up a tent. What's the difference?
They're in the urban service area.
Urban service area.
But were they? That's why I asked that first part of the question. Were they back then? How'd that work?
There are a lot of commercial businesses that are not in the urban service area that were approved back when Fitchburg was a township.
Sure.
There's businesses in the urban service area that probably shouldn't be in the urban service area as well.
Yep.
Asphalt plants, quarries.
Mhm.
Those aren't usually in urban service areas.
Yeah, they grows up around them.
And I think a lot of this, the state legislature gave cities, towns, and villages, you know, we've said this before, this 10-year plan. That's where this came from. This didn't come from Dane County or Fitchburg. It came from the state of Wisconsin, people in the Golden Dome that thought this was a good idea. And it is a good idea, but it's also strenuous for town, city, and villages. It's not an easy process. Here we sit, and they made the plan.
Sounds like there's general support for including this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I support it.
Exactly.
One thing that I'm just thinking of, and it probably has nothing to do with any of this, but just kind of, you said hotels, you know, just the concern from a public safety perspective of people being out in the country at a wedding and then getting to wherever they need to go. So I don't know if there needs to be
So just
Uber.
That can be at the local bar.
Yeah.
You're right, Your thoughts are right, but it
The-
can be at a bar in town.
Yeah, it could.
That's right.
To your point, the couple I've been to, there's a couple in Michigan that are similar to this, and one of them is a winery, operating winery that has a massive barn on it that they typically, it's every week they're booked. They have a specific bus transportation system set up that they run themselves to get people to and from the wedding venue. They take you to one part of Traverse City, and you can disperse to the separate hotels, catch Uber, whatever it is, but there's ways to mitigate that as well.
So not to belabor the point, but just might help. So this is just the first step. We would have to amend the ordinance. So I just wanted to note, for example, conditional uses in small lot ag allows consideration of grain elevators, manure digesting facilities, feed mills, et cetera. You could potentially add another conditional use. So here's just an example of language. Event centers dependent on rural agrarian context, such as wedding, reception, barns. You could change that language however you want when we consider the ordinance amendment. So you could also limit the locations by saying adjacent to a future urban development area or within such and such distance, so that they're not impeding or creating traffic concerns in the middle of the rural area, something along those lines. I think you could also consider other limitations either when you approve the conditional use permit or in the ordinance. So the town of Pleasant Springs Stoughton Barn, for example, they included, they required a security plan, or they required that if attendance is going to be over 200 people, they must notify the municipality 2 weeks in advance, or you could consider like transportation plan or things like that too. But all of that would come in ordinance or conditional use permit review.
So this opens the door to a change in the ordinance, but does not change the ordinance and does not dictate that we're going to change the ordinance.
Right.
And those are things that, this is an area that we wanted to look at Ag and Rural, exactly what some of these conditional uses might be. And this type of use is not something that we have contemplated, and I would not want to go any further without Ag and Rural weighing in on this.
Yep.
But basically what you're saying is this language would open the door for the ordinance to be changed later or not to be changed later.
Correct, because it says uses which may be allowed in ag zoning districts, but currently a wedding barn is not allowed in an ag zoning district.
And Ag and Rural Affairs to me is a key input into something like that. I'm getting a lot of feedback from them and their thoughts.
Well, that's you know, one of the purposes of a lot of what we do is preserving the rural roads for agricultural purpose. And everything you do like this puts more traffic on those roads. Now, if those uses also promote agriculture and make the agricultural land more valuable and, you know, the ag economy in Fitchburg more viable, then great. But building a brand new barn, I mean, that doesn't do that. So you're trying to accomplish some other goal. And that's why I really think
Well, wait
Ag
a
and Rural
minute. Wait a
needs
minute.
to look at this.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Wait a minute. You're talking about ag use, and I follow you right on. But the other side of that coin, I'm talking about our hotels, our businesses, our gas. It's there. It's all out there. I mean, I know what you mean, but wait a minute. There's another side, the other side of that coin. There's other uses in the city that can benefit. And a lot of people go to these events, spend a lot of money in a community. And that's just the way I feel about it.
No, I get what you're saying, and it's interesting that you make the point, because you could probably ask hotel owners who are located in the urban service area, paid the freight for that, built out built out their facilities to host weddings, and now you're gonna allow some low-cost competition, so you know, right, there's two sides to that coin, too.
Not going there. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
All right. Should we move along?
All right, so we just got through all of the goals, objectives, and policies. Back on the agenda, we just want to touch on.
Can I, before you go move along, one of the things you didn't talk about that I know was incorrect last week was specifically one of them was the closed property.
Yeah.
Did you fix that? Do you want
Yep.
to show that? I know
Yep,
that
we
was
will.
a concern by residents.
So
and
that is on
I just want to
page
ease some people's minds on that if I could, quick.
407. Yeah, apologies for that error again. Number 5, the 5th area is the 4 tax parcels on South Fish Hatchery Road, which currently are designated high-density residential, but which may, at the discretion of the Plan Commission and Common Council, be suitable for industrial commercial. That's the currently approved language, not the one that has been tabled until April.
And then April it could change again, but okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. So I think we should do the land use map next. That will go, I think, more quickly, and then industrial land after that. So the draft land use map, again, nothing new. Let me just bring it up. There are the 4 changes. Edgewood identified as industrial, the Oregon School down here as industrial, the Promega proposal on Gunflint, and then the 4th one that was added. It's in this purple block for industrial general, and it shows up as red because that's the outline, but it would be changed to business in order to accommodate a rezoning request for the charter school.
I just had one question on the Edgewood property. I know that we had some restrictions on there about the water and sewer and all that type of stuff. Was one of the other kind of restrictions on that it's only approved for like essentially athletic field type stuff? I think just the only concern someone might have is, let's say for whatever reason Edgewood gets down the process and they say, you know what, we're just not going to do this, and someone else kind of coming in and then it's almost I don't want people to feel like there's a bait and switch there, and all of a sudden something else comes in and says, oh, now we can buy this and we want to put up apartments or who knows what kinds of, a winery, who knows, maybe winery's okay actually, but you know, who knows what could be, but I don't want people to feel like there's all of a sudden that fall through and now something that they weren't okay with all of a sudden is coming through. I don't know if we had put that on there. I can't remember
Right.
that piece.
The resolution, I believe, included language that said athletic fields or other development that might be allowed in the institutional future land use category. So again, it's a little bit weird because typically you don't plan for Edgewood College in a land use plan. But because we decided to specifically plan for this, maybe that's something you should look at the January 21st meeting and make sure that there's language that says only for athletic complex, if that's the goal of the city.
All right.
Can you actually specifically say Edgewood College athletic facilities?
I don't know.
Probably not.
No.
I mean, if they fall through and Verona all of a sudden says, you know what, we like the idea, we want to do the same thing, I mean.
But we designated it institutional, though.
Yeah.
So that's where I was going with it. Is it enough for?
Okay. We'll just verify it, but I think sounds like we're in good shape.
Okay, any other comments or questions, concerns with the charter school change?
Just maybe a question on the charter school area in general. So is there any reason not to make it all business? If that was kind of the proposal that was put forward by Van de Waal?
I agree. I think that was one of my observations is we're changing a land use in the middle of a block. However, because it's the 11th hour and we haven't talked to any property owners, we haven't had a detailed discussion, I was hesitant to explore that.
So that would be a minor amendment after the fact?
If an adjacent property owner said we would rather pursue business zoning, they could bring forward a minor amendment under our normal process to do that.
Okay.
Is that where
next thing, sounds like people are good with those.
So there's a request for discussion on the industrial land issue raised by CEDA. So this is a map that was based on the review that our planning interns do every June. So this is the vacant land map within the urban service area, and it was pared down to only the vacant land or developable land in industrial categories. So it includes and identifies acreages for parcels either currently zoned for industrial or planned for industrial. So their current zoning might be something different, but the future land use plan would enable them to change to industrial. And if you zoom in on this, you can see parcel sizes. So this one's 3 acres. Et cetera. So in total, the land identified for industrial development is 307 acres within the urban service area. There's an additional 25 within the town of Madison areas that will be attached into Fitchburg in a couple years. And then this also does not include potential other industrial development that could be accommodated in other zoning districts. So business, professional, for example, a conditional use permit in business professional could potentially allow light industrial. So this number could go up. It also doesn't accommodate other minor land use changes that might come forward in the future. So we just touched on Promega. Their land use map shows low density residential and medium density residential currently, so it doesn't show up on here, but they've requested that minor amendment to change 9.5 acres to industrial. So if there's an appropriate parcel that's driven by the market, it's not out of the question that we couldn't change and add more industrial land within the urban service area. We compared this to, so let me just back up. So minimum of 307 acres. I just want to acknowledge for the public record too, because this is brought up a lot, that not all of that land is available for sale. There are people that aren't ready to develop, and that's fine. That's nothing unusual. That's how normal communities operate. Over the past 10 years, we've developed 81 acres of industrial land. Over 10 years, 81 acres. We have at least 307 plus the 25 in the town of Madison, plus what might be allowed in business zoning districts, plus what might be allowed by minor map amendments. It's been a recession, we get it. But also, you know, that ebbs and flows, and there might have been a lull in industrial development in certain periods, and then it picks up in others. So I don't have data beyond the last 10 years, but I just know that the last 10 were 81 acres. If additional industrial land is desired beyond this, we have no problem with looking at more land in the future urban development areas. So that would be a process consistent with our current comp plan. When you talk about detailed neighborhood planning, for example, in the South Stoner Prairie neighborhood, if through a neighborhood planning process, people thought, yeah, that makes sense to extend this industrial land down further south, you could add a large industrial park in that neighborhood. So those are ways that you could add more, but I don't think the council-approved scope of work was ever to say maximum flexibility to accommodate more industrial land anywhere besides these areas planned for development. Wade also looked into just comparing to some other communities. So Middleton, we asked Middleton and Sun Prairie. We did not get a response from Sun Prairie on industrial land that they have in their urban service area, but Middleton has 118 acres, and then their population is less than ours. So they have about 59 acres per 10,000 residents. Ours equates to 102 acres per 10,000 residents. And then on Sun Prairie, like I said, we didn't get a response on industrial land, but as noted in previous conversations, they have slightly less land in their urban service area in total than Fitchburg does. That's all I have.
I just thought of this question, or I would have asked you earlier, so you maybe would have, I don't know how easy this is to find, or if you got this. Do you know how much industrial land is currently developed in Fitchburg total?
I think we have that number somewhere, but I don't know off the top of my
I'm
head.
just wondering, I mean, if it's 250 acres, and we've got like 300 plus more available, oh, it looks like, so okay, about 600.
Yeah, it looks like we have
Okay.
663 acres of industrial development.
So we could expand by 50% roughly with what we have right now.
So there's not really a lot out by the new interchange. It looked like there was a little bit.
Out in this area.
Yeah.
So we identified, like, this is the building permits have been pulled for this site for Phoenix, so in all fairness, that could come off. But this is the Hartung property.
Okay.
Other special districts in Smart Code.
Yeah, I think as we develop FUDOs, that's one of the things that we would want to add in that part of the areas we plan out those FUDOs, because there's a lot of FUDOs out there.
Look at where we have the
And I think that's
transportation
where-
capacity for big trucks.
Right, and I think you
And
want that
rail.
closer to transportation.
And rail, right.
Yeah.
I mean, those two should be married together, that rail line and industrial.
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense as those things get planned out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a point that's been brought up repeatedly at a lot of our meetings on industrial land availability, as well as the last 10 years. So this is the data that we have. Anecdotally, there are a lot of things that can happen with all of these 307 acres. There could be wetlands on them. They could not be willing to sell for another 10 years. Those are all site-specific things. This wasn't intended to be a site suitability analysis for industrial development. This is general planning, and I think, just based on the data of trends, we're comfortable with this. And if more land is necessary, we can accommodate in the FUDAs.
Your last statement, have you said that somewhere in the comp plan that I maybe missed? In other words, it can be accommodated in the FUDA? I mean, that, I'm thinking 5 years from now or in the future, your statements that you just made, which I agree with. I mean, I'm not, I'm not questioning you. I'm just saying, do we state that to be looked at? I'm not saying opened up, but I mean,
Yeah, I
to
think
be
there
looked
are.
at, or is that in there somewhere?
I think if you look at the jobs and education chapter, there are a lot of policies that would support that. So one of the ones we added was ensure adequate land for industrial development.
Any concerns? I don't hear anyone else on this body anyway that's concerned, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. We're spending a lot of time on this, and I want to make sure we have adequate time, but there's still more to go, so if we can keep moving, let's do that. Sounds like people are okay with what we have.
On the implementation chapter, I called that out as a specific item since there were a few changes proposed in there. And there were a couple that Alder Clouder proposed last week. Those are attached at the end. So I will open that up. So we defined minor and major. Clouder proposed some changes to that, which we can get to. The procedures for adopting an amendment, this was changed per the council's direction on their resolution. I mentioned that was coming. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission, that the Common Council votes to approve, modify, or deny the ordinance recommended by the Plan Commission for adopting the proposed plan amendment. By a majority vote of the council, the Common Council may make changes to the recommended Plan Commission version of the amendment and order publication of the ordinance adopted by council.
I've got to say, I'm still not comfortable with that. And there's nothing I can do because no matter what, it sounds like city council is going to win, but I want to go on record as I'm not real comfortable with that because it doesn't even clarify what the change needs to be or how substantive it needs to be. It is just council overrides what Plan Commission sends.
Yeah, we should have the council pay the legal fees.
That's my thought. I don't want you off of my tax roll.
Well, I don't really want to approve something that our attorney has advised against. But I would point out that nothing changes here unless both bodies agree to it as of now. This is not something that council can just do. We're talking about a modification of the comp plan right here. This is the whole process we're going through.
Right.
And both bodies have got to agree on that modification. So if that's something that we're concerned about, then
I'm honestly more concerned as a taxpayer than I am as a plan commissioner, personally.
Yeah, I don't agree with the change either.
I'm with you.
All right.
Well, can we go on record as a commission saying?
Explain that.
Yeah, we'll put that in the minutes.
Taxpayer and, just give me an idea.
Sure. If our legal advice from our city attorney has been that the two bodies need to agree. So your amendment would let the city council override what is sent by plan commission. We've said that there's kind of a vagueness in the state statute. So now this becomes just an open door for case policy. Because someone's going to want to make a point of it is Fitchburg is the one who determined this when the law was gray, and now we want to write it in case law so that it's very defined, and who's going to have to defend that but our city attorney on our payroll? That's where my concern comes from. And
yeah, and there's other communities that do it this way. But it's possible that someone locally could say, all right, we want to challenge it.
Didn't the League of Municipalities agree with our attorney?
They did.
how does that work then? If they also agree, if there seems to be a consensus here among those in the legal profession, so why is it up to us? Because none of us are lawyers, right? Well, why are we the ones dealing with it?
Because there are other communities that have done it the other way, and there are other people who are supposedly experts that have. It's written very poorly, and I think that's the biggest problem. And so, and I'm not surprised, but obviously our lawyers are going to be very conservative to try to protect us. Other people that aren't protecting us might have a more liberal interpretation because they're not representing us. They're just saying, looking at this, I feel like it could be either way. You can do whatever you want. So it's a challenge, and I understand the concerns, absolutely, when we have, our lawyer who's looking out for our best interests, and I think would admit is going to be more conservative than someone else might interpret it, but it's written really poorly in the state.
And to play devil's advocate, I'm assuming what you're getting at this is to stop the ping pong?
Yeah.
Well, the situation is, let's back up a little bit. When the plan was written 10 years ago, the intent was that the city council would have the final say. Now, the city council is elected people, elected by the people to run the city. In my eyes, I'll use myself, are the elected officials better than the plan commission or people on the plan commission? Not at all. Not at all. There's no case law. We've talked about that. There's no case law. There's the situation is Janesville, Madison, Verona. They do it this way. This has been a ping pong, and I think if it's let go, it's going to be a further ping pong. Now let's talk about the city attorney. I have to respect her opinion. I do. Do I have to agree with it? No. Did a judge agree with her on Fish Hatchery Road? The case law we just went through? No. The fact is that it was a I have to think. It was a 5-2 vote where the city council discussed it. The city council talked about it, and that's where it went. It went 5-2. And as far as a statement that, you know, I think any city council looks after the taxpayer. I think any city council, and if not, they shouldn't be on the city council. Their main objective is to protect life and property. And the thing is here is it really muddies the water, I think. And how else can we clean it up? I don't know that answer. It just says that, you know, the city council, well, you read it, I don't know.
I think that one thing that, especially people on council, kind of confuses them about how it's done right now is that, and really anything else that happens in the city, commissions, committees, they provide recommendations and the council has final word. Now, you know, there's some state statute that, I mean, this is a little different. It's a little than something like Commission on Aging, but I think for some people too, it's a little bit weird that this is kind of the only thing that the planning committee or the council doesn't kind of have final say on.
Well, they do, as long as they agree with us.
So
you know, you look at Stoner Prairie, my original objection to that was the fact that the city, the council had changed it, not us. And then they wanted to change it back. So what we're looking at, we're talking about ping pong, but we're also seeing ping pong on the council's point, where they're changing it one year, changing it back another year. And I think by doing this, we have a little continuity, we have a little more structure involved so that these things don't happen.
That, to me, that seems to be the purpose of the way that the reason that the statute is written the way that it is, so that you have another body that's looking at this. If you're going to have changes like this, it's kind of like, I'm not comparing us to the U.S. Senate, but that is why there is a U.S. Senate. The House of Representatives can be reactionary. We've had councils that have been reactionary. That's why we've had these problems. We never had an issue like this. We never had a ping pong issue until the past few years. And those have been created exactly like Rich said, because the council changes something and then they want to change it back and then they want to change it again. And at some point, that's not fair to the landowners. People start to make plans based on something that's been approved. And then the council, changes it like this. I mean, maybe this is why the state felt that both bodies should agree if you're going to make a change to your comprehensive plan, so that type of thing doesn't happen. And that maybe there's some discussion then, some rational discussion between the council and the plan commission. We need to make a change. Here's why. Let's all try to get on the same page and be reasonable about it. Yeah, and I think we know what we sent back.
We sent back a compromise. It was your compromise, and that was rejected by the city. The city came back with something else and ended up putting in place something that would have been okay with the compromise anyhow. So it's like we're both trying to get there, but I don't know. I think.
But I also wouldn't put all the changes that happened in the past just on the council, because I know a couple of years ago when I had proposed it be industrial commercial only on the Coles property, for example, it came back as industrial commercial is just an added thing along with high density residential. Now I was brand new on the council at the time. If I knew now what I knew then, I would have said, no, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to remove the high density residential and have it industrial commercial only.
But now you don't want the commercial and industrial. So you've.
Well, that's
right?
council. That's the council.
That's what we're saying.
But,
that's the council.
And there's always that. I mean, even these positions, for the most part, except for your position, change every few years.
But it really is unfair to the landowners and developers when they can't rely on what's in our comprehensive plan because of the flip-flopping that takes place. And I grant it's not the same people. It was different people that were involved in 2017. But this is why we have these problems. And there hasn't been a lot of discussion, gentlemanly discussion between the two bodies over the past few years, and that's made things worse.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna suggest moving along, because I think we should probably just keep it in there for now, and then we'll get some clarification maybe, but.
I would say also, I have to add one more thing though to this, that, because Ed's point, we're still in the previous agreement, so we both should be in agreement between the two bodies. So I want to make sure that whenever this goes back to council, that it's represented in that way. But secondly, and I think more importantly, is that not to just have it be we recommend something and it can be overridden the first time. I think there should be at least some. Because I totally get you. However, we need to end ping pong. The problem is when we're talking about the South Fish Hatch properties that we've been talking about for so long, we had something come to us. We thought we were making a nice compromise. Council rejected it. We came back, had another compromise. Council has since rejected that. Well, postpone that. So I want to make sure that there's at least something that is saying, if we're going to go down this way, it should not just be a one-way recommendation and yet we're scrapping it. Because otherwise, all of us are sitting here until 10 o'clock for no damn reason every Tuesday, once a month.
So are you thinking of something along the lines of more of a supermajority requirement on council to override?
Something that is not just a...
We can't sit here and say that that's legal either.
No. I would want something to encourage at least some kind of a compromise between the two bodies before just immediately overriding one or the other. Whatever that looks like.
So the council is going to have to come up with something that both bodies agree on. Right?
That's not clear.
You talk to the city attorney on how that will be handled.
Yep.
We know what her interpretation is, I suppose. Yeah.
Maybe we all start going to law school, we might get through it by the time.
All right, let's go on to the next piece here.
So implementation chapter, we also added these minor amendment review guidelines, sort of relevant to this conversation on page 439. The goal here was to add some principles based in land use and planning. And these are guidelines so that when the plan commission and the council are looking at something, maybe they have this as like a guidebook or some best practices to look at. So that's all that was. It's nothing that would tie anybody's hands. Major update procedures. Again, this was just to give some clarification because in this process, I think we spent 2 or 3 months just asking, how long does it take? How long does it take if we wanted to do these types of changes? So this just outlines some various levels of what a major amendment, a major update would be. So this just presents a very minimal update all the way to a rewrite. And it also specifies what people have wanted to see a lot too, that state law requires we update at least once every 10 years. And then it goes on to say, however, it is recommended that major updates may occur more frequently than once every 10 years. However, it is recommended that major updates occur no more frequently than once every 5 years. The governing body may determine scope of work of major updates. This is something that Clowder had some proposed changes on at the end, as well as in this section. If you're looking at a rewrite, I've suggested a guideline that says a major overhaul of the comprehensive plan, for example, could include amendments to the future urban development boundary. Such major updates shall be carefully considered only after weighing the need for such an update. And then this part, I think Clowder proposed striking. Because of the ambitious and thorough scope and duration of the original 2009 plan, it is anticipated that the 2009 future urban development model may serve as a baseline for any major update against which to measure new analysis and alternative scenarios. We included this language just as a recognition of the very objective and data-driven sort of land use model that was developed in 2009. It doesn't tie your hands to use it, but it avoids recreating the wheel and allows you to compare other scenarios to it.
But isn't that sort of the point of, if you're going to do a 3 to 5 year process of a rewrite, that it should be rewritten?
Looking at it fresh, yeah. I mean, you could completely scrap all of that information and start over.
Hopefully you're not doing a rewrite every 5 or 6
yeah,
years.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's another point of why we included that language, is just to say this is a very resource extensive process, monetarily and time wise, and we shouldn't be doing it that frequently. To that point, we identified some triggering mechanisms for why you might consider a major update. So it says, consider whether there's a demonstrated need to reevaluate the long-range growth boundary. An example of demonstrated need could include inadequate land supply within the urban service area or planned FUDAs. Or consider whether there's been a large-scale or regional change in physical, social, or economic conditions that has necessitated a change in growth direction or evaluation of growth areas. So these are sort of planning-based reasons why you might change your plan. It says such a major undertaking should consider impacts of development on the community as a whole. Amendments that seek only to accommodate individual development proposals, individual parcels, or isolated land uses are strongly discouraged.
Tom, I don't know if you want to speak to the changes you had proposed on the major update procedures. A couple of them seem minor. There's a couple of big areas you struck out. I wasn't entirely sure why. I don't know if you want to speak to that more.
On that rewrite, Sonia, on the rewrite there, it was just, I think it was in the 2009 plan already, and I just thought it was redundant and it wasn't needed. There wasn't any underlying something I was trying to achieve. Not at all. It was just a situation where, see, there it was strict, there it is right there. I guess I want to ask this question before we go further too. Is this body going to vote on the 21st or tonight as far as the draft plan goes? I'm a little confused on that. What's the
actual
thought?
vote would be on January 21st. That's what you're going to make your recommendation to council. But if you give me any direction today to make sure that meeting goes more
So this is kind of
this would be a good time
to
as a
talk about
body
it,
say
sift through it.
We want it to look like this on the 21st.
Okay. Where it was struck out there, do you leave that in then for the 21st too? I mean,
I don't have a big concern with this change under number 3 rewrite, so whatever the plan commission directs us to do.
okay, that's all. That's all I was wondering. Okay.
I agree with the way that you have it written, Sonia, because there was a lot that went into that plan, and this language doesn't mean that you can't reconsider the growth model. But I think what it anticipates is that the model serves as a baseline for major updates in the future. It may. It anticipates there is some squishy language in there that would allow the model to be changed. But I think this is what we're saying here is that we think right now that we're probably going to stick with the growth model, and we're calling out the growth model because we're not redoing the growth model here. We could do that at some point in the future, but we're calling out the growth modeling that was used in 2009 as being a guideline, and I agree with that. I think it should be.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
I guess I don't see the harm in keeping it in there myself, because you don't have to follow it, but I think it's, especially the further in the future it gets, some of this might get lost, some of the historical knowledge. Kind of the paragraph above that too, I guess I feel like is it essential? No, but I think we hear that question a lot on what kind of timing, what kind of effort does it take to do those steps? And it's just kind of an educational piece to me, which that question comes up a lot. So I thought it might be useful to have that in here as people are reading this and saying, well, wait a minute, does it re-adopt 5 years? Does it re-adopt 1 year? Does it rewrite 6 years? I don't know. And I think most people looking at this aren't going to have any idea, maybe, especially in the future years as more turnover happens on this body, on council. And it just seems like it's good education to have in here, but is it essential? No, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be good with keeping that. And the time to complete piece that was added right above it, I would want to keep that in there because I do think that's good to know.
Yeah.
It's kind of a generic.
Yeah, some of the other minor changes I think are great.
The other pieces I don't necessarily agree with. I don't know. I guess I'd be curious to understand why the changes.
I read the first one is just, instead of saying the governing body, it's really just calling it out as the council, is what it seems like to me. I agree the time complete is a good thing to include in there. I don't know, the only.
Well, the council, it's, you know, you can always insert some more language up there too. Determined by the council, I heard that some of you don't like that, okay. Or you could also put, or benefit to the city.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's a benefit to. Or a benefit to the city council and a benefit to the city. This isn't about the city council. I mean, okay, it is about the city council, the plan commission, but at the same time, it's a benefit to the city.
Mhm.
And, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I
everybody
guess-
on the city council is trying to help the city.
Yeah. I guess what I'm looking at this here is this kind of goes in line with your other proposed change. So I guess if that one doesn't happen, then this probably shouldn't be the language that it is. Because it's kind of calling out that the city council determines the scope of major updates. When I think, doesn't that still fall to both parties?
The scope, like the council kind of really is the one, I mean, it was obviously a recommendation from this body, but I feel like the council really kind of said, no, we wanted this to be an 8-month process.
Okay. As long as it's consistent between, like, whatever we end with, that this, along with however that other thing ends up, are consistent.
Yeah, I don't think I mean, from what we're hearing from staff, or at least my understanding of from our attorney rather, is determining the scope isn't really the issue. It's both bodies agreeing on the changes that are actually being made. So to me, I would think council determining the scope is.
Okay.
I would think not a problem. So now
Yeah, I like that the plan commission provides a recommendation, but I didn't have any concerns with council approving the scope, and I think that's what state law says, is the governing body must adopt procedures, public participation procedures for a plan amendment.
Sounds good.
So I'm hearing a handful of people supporting keeping the language before these strikeouts, but not a ton of really strong feelings.
I'm not voting for it.
What are you saying?
Hearing, I think
we're
I
okay
heard
with
from-
what you have in blue?
I heard from 3 of you that sort of said we would keep what I had originally written, which was this and this, so I wouldn't strike those out. But there really wasn't any concern about making this change or this change, so I could make those in the draft.
Well, the other comment I have, so I see what you're doing, but is there a reason it can't be left in for the public and the public comment on the 21st?
That's fine, I'm just looking for direction of what's
Oh,
best to include in the draft so that we can have a smooth process.
So the red you would leave in. You would not strike out then.
Right.
Then you'd add in the blue.
Yep, just what I'm basing that on, what a couple of you said, yep.
I'm good with that.
Okay. And then this was the last one, Tom, and I did have some pretty significant changes with the strikeouts on minor amendments, but I don't know if you want to cover it first since you proposed it.
I just see he showed up, Mayor, there's a neighbor in the audience that called me on major and minor amendments. Can I have him speak to it too?
Do you want to speak to?
Major and minor amendments, that's all.
Yeah. And then when you're done, if you just
Yeah.
do like a comment request, but you can come up, speak now, and fill out the form, and
You had
hand it
called
in
me
later.
too.
Yeah. Yeah, come up. Yep, come on up. And
Thank you.
Just on this area, minor and major. That's-
Sure. So my name's Tom O'Day. I'm a resident here in Fitchburg on Kilkenny Place in District 2. I've taken a fascination with the comprehensive plan. Really appreciate all the time that all of you have put into this and not only the comprehensive plan, but everything on the Plan Commission. So thank you for it. The major and minor amendment, you know, I'm an attorney by background, so I look at this as a legal document. And eventually it's adopted by ordinance and although not a regulation, becomes part of our city. And to me, the language as proposed to define minor and major amendment that was in the original was too restrictive. Because this is a 10-year document, in my mind, what I would like to see is more flexibility for future councils, for future plan commissions, future planners, to determine, based on whatever offers are in front of them, if something is appropriate or inappropriate. And the change that Alder Clouder proposed, I think, makes sense to the extent that if you're looking at potential opportunities, and just for consideration, you can look outside the urban service area within a quarter section of the urban service area line that's adjacent, and also into the future urban development areas. And we heard some comment earlier about the industrial land, and if we need more industrial land, we can look into those future urban development areas. I think that's the appropriate approach to take. That's the flexibility you need. And this change would allow for you to make that change and make those decisions in the future. I think it's important to recognize there's nothing in the statute that says you can only change this once every 5 years. And there's nothing in the statute that says you can't change it at any point within the 10-year period. So for that reason, I think this language makes sense. Another note, and I looked at the City of Verona comprehensive plan just now on this issue of whether the council has to approve in whole or in part the plan recommendation from the commission. And the City of Verona, in their plan, outlines a process where the city council can just amend or modify what comes from the plan commission. So I think it's important, so a couple of you said that other cities do allow for the council to have that authority to modify and amend, and I too think that's important so that our elected officials have some say in the process. And it's not Fitchburg that's going to have a target on our back for any lawsuit. It'll come from any one of the many municipalities that take that approach.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
Yeah, if you just fill out the form in the back and hand it in, that's great. Thank you. All right, Tom, do you want to speak any further on that at all?
Well, no, I tell you what, I'd like to hear from the other members due to the fact, that was specifically why I kind of dropped it last week and didn't say anything, because I wanted to have you look at it in reference to today, if that's okay. I mean, you know, keep in mind, if there's something that, well, I'll just leave it at that. The whole idea was to have the five of you or whatever take a look at it and see what you think, and go from there, I guess. That's where it's at.
Thoughts from
I gotta make a point too. With these changes, I'm going to give staff credit. Sonia was great. I stopped up and talked to her, and between now and the 21st of June, I would encourage all five of you to make sure you rattle her phone and go up there and talk to her. And I don't care if it's on her lunch hour. Tell her to go another time and I'll buy lunch. I don't care.
You will?
But the fact is, yeah. Now watch all five of you go at lunch.
What's our budget for the lunch? What's the budget for lunch?
Shoot, I shouldn't have said that. Now that I think about it, you all go at lunch.
Open tab on Tom.
You know, I got 5 lunch. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
All right. She was great. No, she was good. We went through every one of these, and actually this one here, she said, Tom, she said, I'm not going to put it in. Let's let the planners discuss it. Let's let the public look at it. Again, I don't have it. You might think tomorrow, I wish I could, that I have a manufacturing plant coming with 200 jobs and they're going to buy houses in Fitchburg. I don't have that. I don't have it. But as my neighbor said, this kind of, the flexibility in here, I know you heard that word before, and I'm a little careful how I use it, but let's just not straitjacket the city. And I'm not going to use anything in the past, just the little flexibility I think is important to the city. So if that, I'll use plastics, if that big company does come to the city, Fitchburg can at least think about it.
I guess my question is on the second section. Within a quarter section outside the urban service area and adjacent to the urban service area.
That's an entire farm.
That's 160 acres, right?
Correct.
And I guess
quarter section is a farm.
So half mile by half mile.
Well, that, and if it's outside the urban service area, is that a minor amendment? I thought that would be much larger than a minor amendment,
I would have thought so.
given that we would have to go through a lot more.
It does it, Sonia? I mean,
Maybe I can provide a comment on why I put this language in here in the first place. So it was meant to clarify our past practice because it wasn't in there before, and I think staff might have said, well, that's a major amendment. It's not happening for 10 years. So this was to put that on the record and differentiate between the two. I think that the proposed red lines watered down that differentiation and sort of scraps the whole idea of providing these definitions in the first place. I think if you water it down like this, it essentially says you don't have to follow the plan. And I think that this is a pretty major change, I think, that is outside of the scope that the council anticipated when they approved this sort of refresh scope of work. And I also think just this sort of amended as we feel like approach is really contrary to a whole host of other policies that we just went through. So all of those policies that talk about future urban development areas, urban service area, plan in logical places approved by the city, et cetera, this would potentially become inconsistent with all of those other policies and I think just cause more confusion. So the areas that I have a specific concern with are this item 2 within a quarter section. I think good points you were just raising. There will always be someone adjacent to the urban service area, and that's why we drew an urban growth boundary, so that we determined one way or the other where we were going. And then number 3, I also have an issue with within the future urban development area. We don't do minor amendments or parcel-specific changes because that would trump that whole neighborhood planning process. And I think we saw a good example with the Fahey South amendment before us tonight where we pointed out that McGaw neighborhood plan for that whole almost 300 acres because then you could identify an appropriate mix of housing, both single family and multifamily. You have traffic network proposed so that you're avoiding congestion and concerns down the road with incompatible land uses. So the ones I have a very specific issue with are number 2 and 3.
you know, let me come back on that then just for a second. I have to admit, I admit it. I guess I'd like the public to weigh in on it, but what if we even drop 2 and 3?
I'm good. I mentioned a week or a month or 2 or however long ago that I thought it would be a good idea to be able to have a buffer a quarter mile outside of it, but I think Sonia's got some good points.
No, Sonia makes a good point. I'm not arguing, but what I'm saying is you don't have to agree on all of it. I can understand that. But I guess I'd like to hear from the public on the 21st and bring this back to you. But even if 2 and 3 were dropped, in other words, just within the urban service area. And every 2 years, you know, if it's in the service in continuous, you know, with urban service area. That's, I think, a big word, too, that's left out. But those are just my thoughts on it. It's, you know, and if Sonia can sleep better without 2 and 3, you know, I'm okay with that. You know.
So, Tom, adding within the urban service area is actually more restrictive than the language that was in there before, because before it said within the planned growth areas. So those could be areas they're in a neighborhood plan that aren't in the urban service area yet, and this would allow that to be a minor amendment. If you add within the urban service area, it really even further restricts what could be a minor amendment.
Yeah, so the point tonight wouldn't have been possible with Fahey Fields. That wouldn't have been possible with that change because they're not in the urban service area. That's a major amendment versus just kind of.
Except there wasn't actually a change there from the neighborhood plan. It was consistent with the neighborhood plan. But if they had wanted to make a change, that would have then become a major amendment rather than a minor.
Yeah.
As Sonia has it defined, that would have been a minor if they were going to change the use in a particular area.
Mm-hmm.
If there was already a neighborhood plan.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of think that I like the language that you originally drafted, Sonia, with regard to both the minor and the major. I'd rather stick with that.
Yeah. Other thoughts at all?
I'll make one last comment, and I don't want, but I just, you know, some of this too is, I think we have to respect the plan. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And this isn't a, I'll use the word willy-dilly. That's not what I'm achieving here. I don't think we're going there at all. With respect, we don't all have to agree with each other, that's for sure. But, you know, I just thought it cleaned it up and made it not so much of a straitjacket. You know, the other part to this, I guess I was thinking about, and yes, I admit it, I was questioning about it the last meeting. It's important that the 10-year plan is done right. And does that mean that if it's a short timeline, it has to have more flexibility? Not really, not really. But even coming out of CETA with some of the things I read they had that I thought were good, I think I was at least on the right page. I was probably in the right church in another pew, you know? But the fact is that's where I was going.
We just had a little sidebar, and I was saying to Tom that I agree. I don't think the way it's written with revisions is quite right, but I do like the intent behind making the minor amendment a little bit more flexible while still maintaining an actual plan.
Yeah, I agree.
But I just don't think the verbiage is quite right. So open and change, just not what's in front of me.
Other thoughts at all? I think I see two things. I mean, one is flexibility means different things to different people. For some people, flexibility means you can do anything you want at any time. And for some people, I think we've added a lot of flexibility to like 2 minor amendment options per year. There's a number of other things in here that I think have added a lot of flexibility already. I think that some of the frustrations in the public is there's been past staff that have used the comp plan to essentially dictate what they want to do and not do and turn down different projects. And I think that's a frustration people had in the past. I think that those people are not in their positions anymore for reasons. And for what I've seen with staff and Sonia and Pat and other people as well is really a willingness to try to find a way to make things work, especially things that make a lot of sense. And so I think that we've taken huge strides in trying to say yes to projects versus finding reasons to say no. And I think that has been a huge change as well. So I think some of that for some people is just difficult to say, oh, wait, in the past, we didn't get this project or that project. Well, some of those people that are saying no are also not here anymore. So I think there's been a lot of positive changes for there as well. So, and I expect that to continue, I guess. So that eases my mind a little bit more, because if there are some great projects come forward, we should absolutely be looking for how do we figure that out and how do we solve that. And then the last page we looked at, even talked about, which this is probably in here in the past, but it does kind of lay out that you can do major updates more than every 10 years, and it says it right in there. I think in the past, some people that used to be on staff were kind of like, no, it's 10 years. Well, wait a minute, if someone is going to come in and have 500 jobs and do all this stuff, yeah, we should probably figure out how to make that work. So, anyway, just a couple thoughts. Zach?
Yeah, I guess I would agree with kind of keeping their language as it was originally. I do think it offers that flexibility. I mean, I think to your point, I'd be open to seeing other language, but I did like it how it was originally written.
Okay. Any final thoughts at all? An implementation, anyway? Yeah.
Back to Phil Thrain, or not Thrain, Phil Svan was talking about the 75-acre number. And did that come, can we talk about that, or we?
Yeah, well.
Did that come from the housing plan, or what, or is it just a magic number that somebody came up with their, magic 8 ball?
It was based on growth projections.
And historical growth. And I believe at the very beginning of this, correct me, Sonia, please, but we've never actually hit the 75 acres per year.
That's correct.
So even though that's a guideline, we've never hit that.
Yeah, but
and gone over that.
we're doing a lot of development. I mean, just.
I know, but we
I'm thinking
still
these-
haven't.
I've used this example
was the
a
number you
thousand
just gave
times.
us
It's
earlier?
2 projects bringing in $10 million a year in salaries.
Yeah, but how many
Yeah.
acres are they using?
Well, I'm talking about for where the people are going to live that want to work there. So we're increasing a lot. We're doing a lot of good stuff around here. We got the linear accelerator, or the neutron accelerator, the Phoenix thing. We've got all this stuff going on, and there has to go more with it, I think. We have to at least consider that. With the growth in jobs comes growth in retail and growth in residential, and these all fit together. And so where we haven't hit it before could very well be because we haven't had that kind of growth. I don't know what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now. And I like what we've got, but that kind of sticks with me that, is that number going to haunt us? I don't know.
I guess I see in 5 years, if that's a problem, that might be a trigger to redo the comp
And-
plan,
and that
if we see that as an issue.
Okay, yeah,
I mean,
makes sense.
that could be one of those triggers.
Because we got a 5-year rolling average anyhow.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so thanks. A couple notes. Past growth trends established it. I remember seeing something that said at the time the comp plan started being discussed, 2007-ish, 2009, we were developing at 104 acres a year, and I think the community felt that was too fast, and so it might have been peeling that back a little bit just to control things. It's also a mechanism to stage and phase development, so we have so many road projects that need to be approved in the capital improvement plan and then actually completed. So it's just that idea of keeping up with the pace of the city's, capital projects and things like that. And then in terms of, it's correct, we haven't actually exceeded that policy. So it's that 5-year rolling average. So last year we might have developed 90 acres, but that doesn't mean it was inconsistent with the comp plan because over the 5-year average it was still less than 75. Also, housing building permits for single-family homes last year, I think, was 107, so a strong year, but this year we're going to top out about 80. So things just ebb and flow, and they're going to average out, at least based on past trends. And then one of the first memos, some good data put together by Wade, looked at what if we wanted to accommodate the more aggressive growth in the housing plan. And if you remember that information, to encourage more single-family platting, which might help the supply and then make affordability better for single-family homes. We platted that out as you could accommodate all of the industrial development and more aggressive housing growth at 71 acres a year. So that's still below the 75-acre growth policy. So it might have been, I don't know all the history. It was, I know, a cause of consternation 10 years ago that people didn't like this number, but I don't have any data that says it's actually been a problem. If it does become a problem, I think, it's something we monitor every year with the planning department. In June, we look at how much we've developed, and if it's consistently being a problem, we can look at that.
We're growing more efficiently, too, than we had in prior years, when even it was interesting looking at the map of the of the city that you had up before, and you could see certain neighborhoods that were platted back in the 1980s or early mid-90s where you've got a lot of 3/4 acre and half-acre lots, and you're going to chew up a lot more land if you're putting up lots that big. And we haven't been doing that since then too. So that was one of the things that was anticipated going forward in 2009. We also had growth projections from the county, and I think the county has been fairly accurate in those numbers. We kind of worked off of that too, but they were largely in line with what the growth had been historically as well.
Right.
All right, so that's all the stuff we wanted to get through. Other discussions, feedback, anything else? Any other comments on the comp plan in general, other things we haven't talked about yet? It's kind of our last time as a group anyway, before the 21st, but you're always welcome to touch base with staff and provide feedback. And I encourage anyone to do that, not just all of you.
No, I will.
Yeah, Tom's buying free lunch.
I won't buy lunch, but I'll back up Tom's Tom's comments about Sonia. She's been great. I've had some many questions. Email, meet me and talk about them. She's been great. Yeah.
All right. And seeing nothing else, do you have a further report from the department?
Next meeting, January 21st.
All right.
I will most likely be absent from that one.
Okay. All right. And
just to clarify
yeah.
for the public, Mayor, I think you said it though. We have a council meeting the second Tuesday. The third one is the 21st. And is that when this draft plan is? No, wait a minute. The public is welcome that night too, right?
Sure,
All
absolutely.
public for
Always
21st.
Yep.
And then once the train leaves the station on the 21st, it's going to be hard to catch it, I think. Am I thinking right?
No, I'd say, I mean, hopefully there's not going to be major changes at that point, but there's still the opportunity for changes at that point.
After the 21st?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be a recommendation.
Let me clarify that, Tony. There's other plan commission meetings. If somebody comes in here on February 1st and convinces the planners that this is a good change to the plan, it can be changed then, right? I mean, am I?
You will have already voted, and so after the Plan Commission recommendation, we're required to do a 30-day public comment period.
That's right. Oh, that's right.
And then it goes to council.
So it'd have to be.
They
So
could
it's more
appear
to the
at council.
at that point.
It would have to be posted. That's right.
Good. All right. Besides that, no other announcements. So if someone wants to make a motion to adjourn, we can do that.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right. We are adjourned. Happy holidays.